Public wishing to address the board may indicate their desire to do so during the relevant portion of the agenda. Persons wishing to provide comments on an agendized item should raise their electronic hand in the Zoom platform to address the board when that item is under consideration. Persons wishing to address the board on matters not on the agenda should raise their electronic hand in the Zoom platform during that portion of the agenda. Please be advised that board members cannot respond to comments regarding a non-agendized item. When it's a speaker's turn to comment, the board president will call on that person and staff will unmute the speaker. All speakers are requested to state their full name and affiliation with the district, if any, at the beginning of their comments when they're invited to speak. Board policy ordinarily limits the time to be devoted to any single agenda topic to 10 minutes, and individual speakers are ordinarily limited to 3 minutes. If the board decides to expand the amount of time to be allocated to a particular agenda item because many speakers wish to address that item, the board may reduce the time allocated to individual speakers to 2 minutes or to 1 minute as appropriate in order to permit more speakers to comment. The board will announce the amount of time to be allocated to each speaker before public comment on each particular agenda item begins. The time allocated to each speaker will be displayed on the Zoom screen. When a speaker's time has expired, staff will mute the speaker. Staff will not notify speakers that their time has expired, so speakers should monitor their own time carefully. All right, with that, Ms. Loizy, would you give us a roll call?
Student Trustee Nori.
Here.
Trustee Ginn.
Here.
Trustee Stevenson.
Here.
Trustee Thompson.
Here.
Vice President Alan Sarver.
Here.
A quorum is present.
I think you missed me.
Oh, sorry. Trustee
I'm here.
Dubois.
Okay, this moves us along to our annual organizational meeting. And the organizational meeting is always a time when the officers of...
Sorry, Alan. I think we have our oath of office first, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and section 5 is entirely the annual organizational meeting.
Got it.
The oath
Got
of
it, okay.
office is the first of
My
those.
mistake.
So each year, we do have an organizational meeting. We do elect the officer's position on the board. But this year, we also have had an election, and we have 60% of our board, 3 of our 5 members, elected to serve the next 4 years, one of whom is re-elected to the position, and 2 others are new additions to the board. And we are pleased and honored to have Assemblymember Kevin Mullen here to deliver the oath of office to all 3 of them this evening. Welcome, Assemblymember Mullen.
Thank you very much, Alan. Great to see all of you. And thank you very much for the honor that you've given me to swear in our newly elected and our returning trustee. So thank you, Alan, for your friendship and your leadership. I believe you're acting president even as we speak.
Yes.
So great to see you, and superintendent and our trustees. It's wonderful to be with all of you as you celebrate either becoming newly sworn electeds or veterans returning to guide the district during what can only be considered extraordinarily challenging times for all school districts in the state of California, and frankly, across the country, but in particular in this state where we already have pre-existing challenges prior to the pandemic, but certainly during these unprecedented times that are confronting all of you, as well as elected officials at every level. So let me just say that the job of a school district trustee has never been more taxing than it is right now. So I'm grateful to each of you for stepping up and answering the call in service of our students and their families. And on behalf of the state of California and my colleagues in the legislature who represent San Mateo County, we are grateful to all of you. And with that, I don't want to belabor this any more than I have to. I want to get right to our swearing in ceremonies. I have the distinct honor of swearing in our distinguished elected officials. And I believe, Alan, the order, I'm going to start with Carrie. Great to see you, Carrie. These Zoom calls are always a little awkward because there's a delay. So I'm going to pause a little bit after each oath line to give Carrie an opportunity to repeat the oath back to me. But I want to make sure Carrie unmutes and is ready to go. Great to see you, Trustee.
Thank you so much. I was told we're doing this, all the three of us together, but no, we're doing it individually.
Well, I asked that question. I thought it might be easier to do all three, but I was told for legal purposes, it's probably best that we do it individually. So this may take a little time, but so we'll get right to it. So
thank you for doing this.
You got it. Absolutely. So please raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Carrie Dubois,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California.
and that I take this obligation freely
And I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations, Trustee.
Thank you, and thank you for doing that slowly. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, and I think we have Shanice on the call.
Yes, I'm here.
There she is. All right. I don't see you, but I know you're there somewhere. I can hear you. I can hear you. All right. All right, Shanice, you are up if you're ready.
Yes.
Okay, I state your name.
I, Shanice Stevenson,
There you are, Shanice. Do solemnly swear.
do solemnly swear, I'm sorry,
That's okay. That I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California.
that I take this obligation freely
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
well and faithfully,
faithfully, sorry,
that's all right, discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon what, I'm sorry, discharge the duties
okay.
upon which I am about to enter.
You got it. Congratulations, Shanice. Great to see you.
Great to
And welcome to the board. Welcome to elected life.
Thank you.
It's all downhill from here. And then we're all going to have this memorized by the end of this session. So Rich Ginn is up next.
All right. Here I
There you
am.
are, sir. Great to see you. Congratulations. So I state your name.
I, Richard Ginn,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
and that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for doing that for us.
Absolutely. And for our superintendent, Leach, just so you know, I have the 3 oaths, copies of what was stated. I'll be signing these officially, sending them back to you so you have legal record that this occurred. And I'll do that right now so I don't forget. But thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to participate in such an exciting evening under such incredible times that we're all living through. And I think an evening like tonight will be memorable for all of us. So thank you so much for stepping up and serving. I'm grateful. Thank you for the incredible work your district is doing. And for my youngest nephew who's going to school in your district, thank you for looking out for him and all the students and all the families that you serve in this beautiful area we call home. So thank you for letting me share in it tonight, and best of luck with the rest of your meeting.
And
Thank
Assemblymember Mullen,
Thank you.
Before you step away, and before we invite our re-elected board members and our elected board members to say a few words, I know this is certainly one of the great highlights of your current week, but I would very much like to thank you for being here and also congratulate you on some of the other highlights. Not only did the great work you've been doing in election rights and election access across California pay off with the greatest voter participation in the state's history in this past election. I'm sure it was a great moment for you, and we are very pleased that you led the voting in the Electoral College this week, that actually provided the votes that put our president-elect over the top. And I want to congratulate and thank you for all of that great work that has gone on.
Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you for your friendship and your support over the years. And that was a little piece of history that I will always take with me. Even though we could debate the Electoral College as perhaps an antiquated institution, it was certainly thrilling to be a part of it. So thank you for calling that out. And this absolutely is at least the second top highlight of my week, being with all of you. So great to see everybody.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
And now I really would like to invite our three trustees who just took the oath of office. Maybe why don't we go in the same order in which we were sworn in, to kind of say a few words about your joining or rejoining of the board, and your thoughts about having gotten here and looking forward, and just kind of help us set the tone for continuing on through the evening.
Well,
Eric?
yikes, I didn't plan anything. We should probably spend more time welcoming. I'm very excited to welcome our two new trustees. Very excited to have somebody from East Palo Alto, representing East Palo Alto, and North Fair Oaks, representing our under-voiced communities. And I know that Shanice is going to have many ideas of how to make those voices louder. And excited to welcome Rich with his expertise in finance and his expertise in technology. So anyway, just can't welcome you enough. And I guess the only thing I'll share is I almost didn't do this again. It was such a bad year. So I've just finished my 15th year as a trustee, and last year was a bad year. And I know it was, I shouldn't say bad, a hard year for everybody in education, especially hard for the students. But I felt like I couldn't leave feeling the way I felt, that I needed to at least do one more term. And so I'm glad I made the decision. I was so glad I wasn't contested because I didn't have the time to run a campaign. I'm sorry, Rich and Shanice, I know you spent so much time with your campaigns, but I was relieved. And I actually did try to talk somebody into taking my seat. I think the job looked awful from afar, but it really is not that bad. It's a great job. The best thing about it is getting to know the many educators and the administrators. I've learned so much from all of you. Appreciate all the tours that you've given at your schools. I appreciate all that you've taught me. I appreciate your pushing back on me and helping me learn, because it's constant learning. So anyway, I'm glad to be back and look forward to working with our two new trustees.
Thank you, Carrie. Shanice, do you have a few words?
Yes. Thank you so much, Alan. I am actually very excited. I'm sitting here and trying to hold back the tears because I'm so excited. But I just really want to thank all the people who knew that I was not thinking about running for the board, who kind of talked to me over several months, not 1 or 2 months, but like since like March or something like that. And I really didn't make the decision until August, when I felt like I could have an opportunity to give and be a part of the team. So I'm very excited to be here. I know I stand on many people's shoulder, including my own family and my faith and my husband and my children, but also the many people who came before me who have been on the board. We just so happen to have a seat for our designated area, but I know there's many shoulders that have come before me that I get to stand upon, and just really want to honor my community and Jackie Sarabrain and all the people who supported me, and particularly my community. So just want to say thank you. I'm looking forward to being here.
Excellent. Rich, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, I'll say a little bit. Wish I knew this was coming out. You kind of got this got a little surprise for us. I guess I'll start by thanking all the people that helped me get here. There's a lot of work that went into the campaign. Carrie mentioned it, and a whole lot of people who helped me. I really appreciate everybody's help. Thank you. You know, it was a tough race. There were great people in the race. I really I've served on school board before. I really enjoyed it. And I think what I enjoyed the most in my prior experience can be the same here, which is people who care, bring a range of perspectives, all have their heart in the right place, that they want to do what's best for kids, but bring their own perspective to it. Thoughtful, good discussion, and we all do our best. It's a tough time for the community, tough time for schools in general. And that's why I wanted to get involved, to try to do the best I can to help. And I look forward to working with everybody on the governance team and the extended staff as well. So thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. So certainly, Trustee Thompson, if you'd like to say a few words of welcome before I barge in.
I'd absolutely like to do that. But most of all, to say welcome to my new colleagues. I am enthusiastic about your joining the board, particularly for the diversity of experiences you bring and the new ideas you will bring to our deliberation. I want you to know that I will try and listen carefully to what you have to say. And at the same time, I expect to be re-energized by this newness that you bring to the board. Finally, I guess I would say to you all three that it really took a lot of courage to run at this time for the board seat. As Carrie mentioned, it's the toughest, and as Kevin Mullen mentioned, it's the toughest time to be a school board member, I think. But with your arrival, I expect things are only going to get better from here. Your arrival and the vaccine. So welcome.
That's a wonderful point, Chris. This is quite a momentous week in terms of change and arrival of the cavalry and the reinforcements. In terms of the vaccine, this week represents D-Day in the war on COVID. And we need to recall that in World War II, victory in Europe was declared almost exactly a year after D-Day took place. And we do have a long period of time that we're going to need to negotiate through as the vaccine takes hold across the country. And it contributes to the ever shifting landscape in which we're trying to do our job these days. So we know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We have very good reason to suspect that it is not just the headlight of an oncoming train, but truly the end of the tunnel. But we have to be doubling our efforts in negotiating the tracks carefully going forward. With that, I want to join Chris in really welcoming two new board members and welcoming back Carrie for the coming term. It is going to be exciting and refreshing to have two new members bringing very diverse and great talents and insights. We are going to be doing a lot of building and rebuilding of our governance team to really establish the new norms, the new working relationships, the new effectiveness of our board and our governance team with the interim superintendent. And we have a lot of business on this evening's agenda that is going to be moving that work forward. But really, I'm very much thrilled to have both of you here. I look forward to the time when, my goodness, all of us are actually present in a boardroom together, but we'll become great Zoom buddies over the coming weeks and months until that time arises. So with that, I would like to move on to agenda item 5.2, the election of officers. And I'd like to do a couple of things to frame that. We're going to have a bit of conversation before I actually hold the election. And kind of in terms of framing and shaping it, we have the protocols outlined in the governance handbook that has been included. And those protocols for this activity really showed a great deal of evolution over the past 5 years on the board of the previous board that was here. And to me, there are at least 3 levels of subtlety that are involved in the protocols for re-election. Prior to the establishment of this protocol, the board election in this district each year was handled fully as an election without particular traditions, expectations, ground rules laid out, where somebody would nominate a candidate for president, perhaps additional candidates would be nominated, and then voting would be taken. And there was no formal expectation of any sort of rotation. And in the interest of fairness and inclusiveness of all of our board members, we came to a protocol that talked about expecting that under normal circumstances, the vice president would be nominated as president, the clerk would be nominated as vice president, and the next person on the line on the dais would be nominated as clerk, and then those positions would be elected. Since that time, a major transformation has come over the board in the way it is elected. We have moved from at-large elections to trustee district area elections. And so now, as we consider fairness of moving trustees along the line into roles on the board, we also need to take into account the fairness of the voices of the trustee districts they represent. And to be sure that when somebody new is elected to the board at some position in the train, or when, in the case of tonight, a new trustee district is represented for the first time on the board, that those voices are not neglected or relegated particularly far down the line. And at least Trustee Ginn has already raised to me the suggestion that some of the structure of the roles on the board are also worthy of getting a little bit more in-depth consideration and perhaps reevaluation. And some of the distinction of 3 elected positions within the board and 2 trustees, and kind of viewing that as somewhat of a vertical pecking order is not perhaps the most appropriate and effective means of governance. And so I would like us to have a bit of brief conversation about these issues, and before we go into actually just electing on the basis of the protocol as it exists currently. But I would also then like to suggest that there is a lot of governance team development that comes on our plate as a very high priority activity from this moment forward. I trust that we will have a substantial conversation later on this evening about having a governance team retreat as early as possible in January. And there are clearly a number of very significant structural activities that this governance team is engaged in now and going forward. So I would propose, out of all of this consideration, that it might be very appropriate to end up following the protocol that we have in place for the election activity that is on our agenda right now, and with the intent of really having in-depth conversation about this protocol and this procedure, among other governance issues, in our retreat. And that perhaps then we would have the agree to the intent that if the outcome of that discussion in the retreat is a desire to change around the protocol, that we might at that point consider making adjustments to our roles on the board at that time. And if we have an adjusted protocol, that we hold an adjusted election at that time. So with that long bit of introduction, I'd like to have comments back from other board members to see where we get about then proceeding with the election.
Well, I'll go first since you mentioned me.
Yes.
I don't like the whole rotating thing. I think in terms of who we elect right now, I think it probably is the same people would be anyway. So I'm not looking to make any kind of change for this year. I propose, I'm fine discussing what we do next year at a retreat in terms of who we elect. But before we elect a president, there's a specific thing there's a couple of things I'm interested in just to make sure that you would be interested in. And in particular, the governance handbook has the president and vice president planning every meeting. And I wrote an email to everybody on the board before I was Brown Act locked up, saying that I'd prefer to have a rotation of who joins the president for each, between each meeting. And I'd be interested in electing a president that is interested in doing that same thing. If other board members also want to do it, if I'm alone in wanting to rotate through, then I would be, I guess, not planning any meetings for 2 or 3 years. But so I'd be interested to know, just, you all know what I'm interested in doing. I've sent everyone an email about it. I mean, are other people in favor or opposed to rotating? I guess that'd be my first question.
Carrie, your hand's up.
Yeah, I would be very open to that, as long as we just have to get clarification on the Brown Act, right? Because a lot of the same topics can come up again and again. So I am in favor of having more voices set the agenda. And I also just want to make the point that I don't believe the president has the strongest voice, and I don't really see the president leading other than managing the meetings, right? And making sure that all voices are heard. So I don't see it as a line of people with one person having the strongest voice and the person at the end having the weakest voice. We should really work that we all have equal voices. And I also want to say that when I was a brand new trustee in San Carlos, I didn't mind being at the end because I was brand new. And I was told before I ran not to look at this job as a one-term job, because the first term you're learning, and if I was going to run for school board, I had to think of it as an 8-year job. And I remember when that person told me that, I thought that sounded just awful. And here I am in my 15th year, right? And still learning. So, I like your idea of talking more about this at the retreat. I like the way you framed everything. But again, the president should not be the leader and shouldn't have the strongest voice. Thanks.
Chris?
So I concur with what I hear is 2 suggestions from our colleague Rich Ginn. The first being that we tackle that at our next retreat, where we focus on the governance issue, that we look at the officers and each of those issues related to the election of officers. Also, I like his suggestion on rotating board member with the board president. Now, we know the board president by definition has responsibility for the agenda. This is nice, particularly now with 2 new board members, that will get them engaged in those conversations sooner. I also don't think that's not an issue that we would need to vote on, I would guess, but if there's consensus on the board, we could move forward with that immediately without any change to governance handbook.
Only that it's in the governance handbook that's how it's done. If that matters. It is written in the book.
Yeah.
If we meet in, my sense is if we meet in January to revise, we could revise that at that time if there's board concurrence on that issue.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. And
Denise, what do you think?
So for me, I'm all new, so I haven't been on a board before. So I think any of it sounds fine with me. I do particularly like the rotating with the board president, just because if you never get to see how you set an agenda, you just don't know. And so, and also it gives a chance to see how does things get on the agenda, which is most important to me, is how do we begin to talk about really hard topics or really challenging topic. But if I can't figure out what the agenda process looks like, it makes it a little bit more difficult for me as a learner. but I'm open to whatever people want to do, but I do think seeing the agenda and seeing that process would be helpful. My only question is you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but then there's a vice president. So that's almost like a training role that you start watching the agenda. So how do we deal with that piece?
Well, you'd be like, instead of being trained only for the 1 year before, you'd be 1/4 trained each year before. So like you and me wouldn't be vice president, but we'd both be getting trained this year.
Mm-hmm.
And probably neither of us would be vice president the next year, or maybe one of us is, but we'd both still be getting trained that next year.
Okay.
So it would just be spread over more years, and you'd be observing different presidents perform the role.
And so based off your experience and now Alan's experience of being trained for the president, does that give you enough time to give you a sense of how to set the agenda, what the role of the president looks like? Is that enough time? That's my only question.
I would say it is. So the training really isn't so much. The hard part of being board president isn't so much setting the agenda. You're doing that with the superintendent. The hard part is running meetings. And we all get that by watching the meetings, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the hardest part,
okay,
in my opinion.
Okay, then I'm down for it. I'm okay.
All right. So if I can summarize from that, I think the will of the board here is that we would follow the protocol as written for the current election of officers, that our officers to be elected will be president, vice president, and clerk, that we will be looking to hold a retreat, a governance retreat as early as possible, probably in January, that these protocols in the handbook will be part of the many things that we want to touch on in there, and that there is a consensus across the board that we would like to move in the direction of the other 4 board members in a rotating cycle with the board president and the superintendent in the agenda setting meetings, with a lot of clarification shared around and strengthening in our protocols of how agenda setting is done, and how all of the board members are engaged in that.
I actually have one other comment, that perhaps we only elect one of either a clerk or vice president, because I was proposed that those 2 become the same role. And then if we decide we really need a 3rd in January, we could elect a 3rd. And maybe a person could be both vice president and clerk until January. And if we want to add an extra officer, either someone else becomes vice president and that person remains clerk, or someone else becomes clerk and that person becomes vice president only, that we merge those 2 roles into one, because the clerk has almost no duties except to just sign a few things, as I understand it.
What's the clerk role again, please?
The clerk as the 3rd officer is fundamentally is signing as clerk where that is necessary for any documents that come along during the course of the year. And the official role is not particularly strong beyond that point. My observation on this, when Rich raised the point, I went off and checked around at the districts around us, and in the 8 K through 8 feeder districts into Sequoia, they're split half and half between those that have 3 officer roles and those that have 2 officer roles. All of the high school districts in the area have 3 officer roles. My strong inclination on this is to bring in all the information that we need into our retreat to really be able to evaluate this, and hopefully have some CSBA facilitation and guidance in the retreat to really determine whether it makes sense to make a change in that regard. I'm happy to be, open to that exploration, and the result perhaps being making a change. But I would be just opposed on the idea of making that change right now for the election we're about to undertake.
I like that idea, Alan. I think we need to, I would love to put that as part of our board retreat and have around governance and how we want to function and what roles and things of that sort. I think that's a good idea.
Chris?
So I'm inclined to put it off for the retreat for more discussion, although I'm in favor, my sense is to favor Rich's initiative. And the rationale for that has a lot to do with the fact that we have 2 new board members. And the current way our system works, if we go the clerk, vice president, president rotation, we have 5 board members, 4 presidents elected, or a president elected once every 4 years. One of those new board members might not have the opportunity to be president, which I think would be unfortunate. And for that reason, if we get rid of the clerk position, we'll only have the 2 people in line. It'll be easier. That said, I don't see any downside in deferring that decision until January. With one exception, and that would be conceivably we unelect one of the officers. Should we move to the vice president clerk position? I don't think that's a big deal.
I would agree. And I think we'll be able to hash out those details at that time. And again, it's within 1 or 2 agendized meetings at this point.
So just to maybe move it along, if we were to follow the protocol, I know you're president, who would be vice president and who would be clerk by the protocol that is in place?
So by the protocols that are in place, as the vice president, I would be normally the nominee for president. As the current clerk, Carrie would normally be the nominee for vice president. And as the last time we were sitting in a line, Chris was the next seated in line who would normally be nominated for clerk. And
I'd like to make a motion that we nominate you to be president, Carrie to be vice president, and Chris to be clerk.
Do I hear a second for that?
I second.
All right. Any other discussion or alternative nominations?
So
All right.
I have a question so that I'm confused. So we're making the motion, but does that mean we're still going to discuss this in January?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We just need officers from now until January.
Yeah.
Okay. We need officers. Okay. Thank you.
All right. With that, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All right. So that election has been taken care of. And I will eschew a flowery speech in thanks of being elected president. But this is how a peaceful transition of power takes place, and I hope we can all learn from it. All right. So let us move on to agenda item 5.3, board committee participation. And
Ed Sarver,
yeah,
can we, what about letter D on item 5.2?
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
That is wonderful. Okay, so nominations for the representatives of San Mateo County Committee on School District Organization. Now here, this is a role that I have filled for the last several years. And in our organizational meetings, it has usually come up, and it's been along the lines of everybody looking at me and saying, are you willing to still keep doing that? Fine. And I can say that over these past several years, I've attended essentially one meeting per year at which no action has been required of me. And you're just kind of paying attention to things. We did have some business with that committee when we went to trustee district elections. And you can move up onto the executive board within that committee and end up having a voting role on various issues that do come up with communities wanting to move from one school district to another or other boundary issues. And I would say that if any of our trustees is interested in the role, I have absolutely no superior claim to want to hold on to it. And if the other 4 trustees would like to leave me stuck with the role, I have no objection to that either. And with that, I turn it over to the rest of the board for any discussion or suggestions.
I'd be open to doing it, but not going to fight for it.
I don't have interest. I'm happy for you to continue doing it, or if anybody else wants it, I'm fine with that.
I don't have interest.
I served in that role prior to Alan, I think. I'd be happy to do it. And like you said, it's limited involvement, except at special times, conceivably, that seem rare. I'd be happy to step up and volunteer to do it, simply because I think our board president has better things to do. And I expect he's going to stay very busy for the next several months.
I would agree with that. And I would honestly say, I have a feeling in our next agenda item, we'll find that Rich is going to have the opportunity to have better things to do as well. And future opportunities at this one. So I
move that Chris serves in the role.
And I second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Chris. All right. Now, we can move on to board committee participation. And that's contact person is Interim Superintendent Leach. So I'd like you to begin getting a word in edgewise.
Thank you, President Sarver. So throughout the district, we have several committees that often we like to request representation from the board. A lot of them support board initiatives, district initiatives that we have going. And then also, they also create partnerships within our district boundaries, whether that be community partnerships or also partnerships with fellow feeder districts. So attached to this agenda item is a list of the current committees. And then also it gave the participants that have served from July 1 up into today for the reorg. So if we want to go through here and reevaluate if we will continue to have the same board members, and then who will replace the ones that are no longer with us. So of course, my favorite committee, the one at the top, the budget committee, currently have board reps of Alan and Chris. The schedule for this is to be determined. Obviously during COVID, things change a little bit, but we do meet a few times throughout the year.
So I don't know if it makes sense to talk about kind of all of them as opposed to going one by one, so we can kind of, or if we just do one by one, then I don't know how you're thinking. If you want to go through all of them and then we put people in, or like I'm interested in this particular one, but I feel like it'd be good for everyone to kind of, I don't know, have you guys done this in the past? It seems like if each person.
Yeah, I agree. It might be good to get the lay of the land, so we know again.
Yeah, maybe you want to just describe what each
even.
one is, and then we can just say what our interests are, and then we could pick as a third step, as opposed to picking.
I have questions about, there's acronyms on here that I don't understand, which are like BRSSD. And then I have questions around why they are committees, particularly the ones that are more partnership based. And then there's other cities or communities that don't have that. So I just have a couple of questions.
Maybe Chris,
Okay,
you can give an overall.
we can go through them
Yeah, let's go through all of them.
together.
Yeah.
I would imagine there's probably going to be more questions within there, so we can just answer them as we go. So the Board Policy Committee has 2 board members that serve, and as we receive packets of board policies that require updating from CSBA, we meet usually on a Wednesday afternoon around 4 o'clock to digest the board policies that we make it as a collaborative effort instead of staff just working on board policy and then bringing it to the board for board approval. BRSSD is Belmont Redwood Shores School District. We do 2x2s with some of our feeder districts. Not all of our feeder districts are interested in 2x2s. They're not as steady as often as the 2x2s with Belmont Redwood Shores. Some of them have had before they've been scheduled, but then have had to pause due to just different district business that they have going on within their boundaries. They usually meet once a quarter, I think, or once every other month. We also have the Redwood City 2x2. Again, that's similar to the other 2x2 that we have, but I believe that one also involves the city of Redwood City along with Redwood City Elementary School District, and then also Sequoia, us. We have the Wellness Committee. That committee is facilitated by our Coordinator of Health and Wellness, which is Javier Gutierrez. It's a district-wide committee that adopts certain initiatives throughout the year, whether that be, being a good technology citizen and managing the mental health and social and emotional needs within our district. Also, the times of these are often scattered and through the day just because they also include a lot of staff. The Digital Wellness Committee is a fairly newer committee. We're trying to merge them with the Wellness Committee, but because the Digital Wellness Committee has such a large lift right now, it is its own committee, and that is facilitated by, again, the Coordinator of Health and Wellness, as well as our Chief Technology Officer, Rick Alva. Redwood City 2020 is a partnership. And this one I'm not as familiar with as I'm still fairly new here. A partnership with the city of Redwood City Elementary School District, I believe the Chamber, and other Redwood City community partners that take up initiatives within the boundaries of Redwood City. Sequoia does play a very active role with that committee. We have our English Learner Advisory Committee, same thing again, periodically meeting. The Benefits Committee is a newer committee as the district has taken up the initiative and trying to move and exit CalPERS, which is our current benefit provider. This is a very big lift. There is a lot of financial expenses tied to either staying or leaving CalPERS, and so the request for board representation is highly desired. The District Equity and Diversity Council, this is a newer committee as the district is committed to moving towards more equity and diversity within all of our processes and protocols within our district. This is a newer committee that we are also asking for representation on. A Workforce Housing Committee, I've actually served on that committee in my associate's role. Meets quarterly. Obviously, they haven't been meeting lately, but this is in partnership throughout the county on how to create workforce housing. What role would school districts have? What role would cities have? And also the county. So it's a collaborative throughout the entire county. And then the SEL, Social and Emotional Task Force, that's a newer committee. One of the major grants and partnerships that we have related to social and emotional learning is with the County Office of Ed. And so as we adopt new curriculum around such a large initiative, staff also felt that it would be a good decision to invite board participation in with this committee.
That actually helps me. And then I just had one other question is, I don't know how 2x2s happen, but I would think that Ravenswood School District and which crosses probably City of East Palo Alto, City of Menlo Park, would need a 2x2 given the time that we're in. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's going to take a lot of coordination with COVID. I know I've been on, as a parent, on special ed task force regarding kids who have IEPs and 504 plans, and they're not always at the table. And I think with so many kids going to our school from those areas, that there needs to be some type of 2x2 or something for that district. But it's just a suggestion. I'm new, so I don't know.
So we did have, it's my understanding, Shawnee's, that we have had 2x2s with Ravenswood before, but as they were going through a leadership transition and other things within their district, I just believe those were paused. So we could definitely reach out to our feeders to see if they are interested in the 2x2s that we do not currently have scheduled.
So I think in
Yeah,
that
yeah, Shawnee's.
do it in the event that it's formed.
Sorry, what did you say? I couldn't hear you, Rich. You kind
I
of
suggested that we name people to a Ravenswood 2x2 in the event that it's formed.
Yes, that's
If
what
it's not formed, it's not formed, but if it exists, I assume you have interest in serving on it, so we might
Yes,
as
I do.
well have you on it.
Yeah, because it's a lot of kids, so I wonder.
Yeah, Shawnee's, it used to be that Chris Thompson and I were on that. There was a Ravenswood 2+2. We were on it for many years, and the meetings just never got scheduled. But it was, our interim superintendent is correct. It was because of the leadership transition, I think, and they may be ready to resume them at this point.
Is it possible we can add that, and how? If so,
Yeah, absolutely.
Do I need to vote? Do I need to recommend it, or how does that work?
I think we're
I think we're going to name you to that committee and one other person.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Just a
Rich.
few minutes.
I think we've already heard a board majority interest in doing that.
Thank you.
So President Sarver, going to Rich's initial question about how we handle this, I wonder whether if each of us listed like our top 3 picks, that would at least give us a starting place, although I'm sure there would be too much overlap in that, but it would get us going just as a sorting.
Okay, I'm good with that. So we could take a moment to each kind of go through that and make that determination.
We may have already done that.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first, Alan?
Sure.
Yeah. So currently I'm on Redwood City 2020, and I'm on the Wellness Task Force and the Technology Wellness Task Force. I don't have the list in front of me right now. I'm happy to stay on those. If a new member or somebody else wants on any of the committees I'm on, I'm happy to trade. I have a lot of interest in the Redwood City 2020 committee and those other 2 that I just mentioned, wellness and technology wellness. I'm very interested in the SEL task force. So interested in joining that. I'm also on the Belmont Redwood Shores 2+2 and the Redwood City 2+2. I'm happy to go either way on those if somebody else is interested. Happy to stay or happy to leave.
Okay.
And for me, the things that I'm interested in, I think I have too many things, but of course I would do the 2x2 at Redwood City EPA Menlo Park. If we were to add that to this, which I think we are. The other one that I would be interested in is the Equity Diversity Council. And then the other piece where I'm actually, I'm torn between the Sel Task Force and the workforce housing, just because I think both of those are key to providing quality education for kids. So but I'm willing to do some other committees as well.
Okay. And Rich?
I'm interested in budget, benefits, and the 2 Redwood City ones.
Okay. And Chris, your thoughts?
Budget, equity and diversity, Ravenswood EPAA, and if we need a fourth, the Redwood City 2x2x2.
Okay. And I'd say that, my attitude is very much filling in where gaps remain. I am on the BRSSD committee and would have an interest in staying there. I'm on the digital wellness and would have an interest in staying there. Although I'm on the budget committee, I've heard interest from 2 members in being on that, and I would be willing to step away from it.
So it sounds like I'll take your spot on budget and you'll keep your other spots.
Yeah. And I would say that we need to fill the board policy committee. And
It's empty.
that, that's an important one. So I would be willing to step into that. And it sounded like, I'm not
Gary,
sure
how do you feel
that,
about being on policy?
Me?
Or Chris, I don't know who,
I'm worried that I have a lot.
you have a lot already.
I think, the hesitation on policy, while policy is so important for the board's work, most of the work that's being done there are administrative updates from CSBA. And I wonder whether we really need 2 board members looking at that kind of work. I might ask, I think Bonnie has worked with Georgia and Alan Weiner on that. Does it take 2 board members?
We all did. I don't think it takes 2 board members, but I would defer to Crystal for sure and interested in what Jackie thinks. But no, I don't think it takes 2 members.
I mean, I think the part of it is sometimes you need someone with history. It'd be really hard for me or Shanice, I think, to do it without having history on the policies at all.
Yeah, I think you could do it with one person, though.
I'd be willing to be that.
Okay. I guess I'll say if you need a second, you can call me in as needed. How's that? But if it's all administrative and one person is good enough for the particular set of policies, I won't be offended to be left out of some of the meetings.
Okay. So I think we could probably, at this point, roll down from the top and just say, so our budget committee, it sounds like we have Rich and Chris that want to continue there. Board policy will be me with Rich on tap as we feel we need a second board member involved. Belmont Redwood Shores, I expressed interest in staying on. Carrie, was that you'd be willing to, or?
Yes, I'm willing to, if nobody else has interest.
Okay. All right, the Redwood City. And I'd like to, well, at least we should look at together the Redwood City 2x2x2 and the 2020. It was the same board members before, but I think we've got a sense that the 2020 is probably more deeply aligned with our district interests and needs, and the 2x2 is a little bit more, I guess, formal mechanical city interests.
I mean, Alan, I would disagree with you. I served for 2 or 3 years in the Redwood City, and it seemed like there were lots of overlapping issues between the city and the school district with high school. That they always had a full agenda, I think.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, I would think that probably the same 2 people would do best on both of those together. All right. And Carrie, you said you were interested in remaining on that.
I'm interested in
didn't say
Redwood
so.
City 2020, and I don't see as much of an overlap. So if somebody wants to be on the 2+2, I'm fine with that, or I'll do both.
I'm
More- I'm
interested
more
in being on both.
Okay.
Pardon me?
I'm interested in being on both.
Okay.
But there's three, whatever. If I,
So Chris, is it okay if Chris takes my Redwood City 2+2? Is that all right? And I'll stay on Redwood City
That's
2020?
fine.
Okay,
Fine.
that works for everyone.
All
so
right.
which one is Chris taking?
The 2+2+2.
City and school district.
And the 2020 is Carrie with me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. The Wellness Committee, Carrie, you're interested in staying on?
Yes.
I've been having difficulty making those meetings. They tend to conflict consistently with the music mentoring program I run after school. So if someone else would step into that, I would be happy. It's probably going to continue to be a timing challenge for me.
I will consider it, but I want to wait till we hear about all the other roles first.
Okay. Digital wellness, I think Carrie and I are both happy to stay on.
Mhm.
All right, the English Learner Advisory Committee, I haven't heard voices for that. I think that's an important one.
I can do that because I did see that, and I think it's important for me to learn about the English language learners in our community.
Okay, and I would be happy to also be on that.
Mhm.
I'll say, Alan, you're loading yourself up with board president and all these things.
Yeah, he can do a lot though.
Okay.
More than the rest of us.
I do have the unfair advantage of being otherwise unemployed.
Very well.
And a lot of energy. He even jogs past my house, if you could believe it. From his house to my house, he jogs by every morning. He has a lot of energy.
All right.
That's why I have the energy. All right, Benefits Committee. Chris, were you going to stay on that?
I can do that. I would tell my colleagues, is nobody else volunteered for that?
I did. I volunteered,
Oh, all right.
but that's just one. Need somebody else, I think.
I'll join you on that unless somebody else wants to do it.
Okay. Great. All right, the Equity and Diversity Council.
That was myself and Chris, I
And
believe.
Chris.
That's right.
Okay, great. Workforce Housing.
I would be interested in that, I think. if there's-
And I've been in and out of that, so if there's no other person, I'd be happy to.
Okay. I can just consult with you if I have questions.
Yep. All right, and then the SEL Task Force.
I'm interested in that.
So Alan, if it's too much for you, then I can do the wellness committee depending on what days that the meetings are on.
Okay,
And that would give you a lot more freedom to be the president and go to all the meetings that you need to go to for that.
okay. Appreciate that.
Okay, and then you would add EPA, Menlo Park, Ravenswood, 2x2.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And was there another taker with Shanice for that?
Chris, is it in your area?
Sure. Not because it's in my area, but I'll be happy to take that on.
Okay, so let's run through these real quick, just make sure
Yeah.
we have it. So the Budget Committee, I have Chris and Rich. Board Policy Committee, we're going to do a singleton of Alan. Belmont Redwood Shores, 2x2, Alan and Carrie. Redwood City, 2x2x2, Chris and Rich. Wellness Committee, right now, Carrie. Do we have a second for that?
I think Shawnee's was second.
Shawnee's.
Okay, Shawnee's. Okay, what about the Digital Wellness Committee? I have Carrie and Shawnee's for that.
No, that was me. Carrie
Okay,
and me.
so Carrie and Alan. Okay. Redwood City 2020, Carrie and Rich. English Learner Advisory Committee, Shawnee's and Alan. Benefits Committee, Chris and Rich. District Equity and Diversity Council, Shawnee's and Chris. Workforce Housing Committee, Shawnee's and Alan. SEL Task Force, Carrie. Do I have a second?
I had Shawnee's written down for that. Shawnee's,
What-
did,
Which one again, Rich?
That's Social Emotional Learning, SEL.
Because I'm doing the wellness committee, I'm not gonna do the cell.
Ah,
okay.
So we can start with one.
Mhm.
It's a newer committee, and then Carrie can tell you all how fabulous it is and maybe recruit another one of you. Ravenswood 2x2, Shawnee's and Chris.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then just to make sure I understand the 2x2 process, who initiates those meetings? Is it a staff person? Is it the board does it? Like, how does that typically work?
So Laura, so usually it's the superintendents at each of the districts.
Mhm.
Their admins schedule it. We look for board availability. Like Belmont Redwood Shores, I think we've done one. It was on like a Friday at 10.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, in addition to the committee participations, as well, we try to set study session topics for the year. So the study session topics that we currently have, a lot of it can be housekeeping, general larger sessions that need to address district business. Right now, we did switch from the 16th, which was additionally going deeper with equity and diversity. With our equity and diversity consultant, she recommended that the board postpone until we had the new board trustees in place. And considering COVID and distance learning being such an important topic, last week we changed and went and did our study session on distance learning. So we still have a to be determined for equity and diversity as far as going deeper with the board. We also have what will be the results of the benefit study for CalPERS. That is definitely worthy of a study session because again, it has such a large financial impact and it is a negotiated item as well to exit CalPERS. So it is an entire Sequoia Union School District family event to do so. And then the budget and the LCAP priorities, that needs to occur in May as budget adoption occurs in June. And then a board retreat. Usually those take place in June, but I believe we also want to hold one in January. So we can add, we can change. There's just a couple on here. Definitely the budget and the LCAP priorities, that's kind of a must as far as fixated around the May deadline.
I would think that we will come out of our January retreat with, I think, a better awareness on all of our parts of anything we might want to add to this list. And probably a better sense if we think there's anything that should come off of it, which I would be less likely to expect, unless somebody has something.
I think that's a good idea, Alan. Let's plan for the retreat and then address these at the retreat.
Okay, we're making a large event out of this retreat, so we'll talk about that at the end of the evening. It may be a week-long activity. I just wanted to get a laugh out of Bonnie. Okay. That feel like closure on that item for now?
Well, when do we set the date for the retreat? At the end?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
in our agenda planning. Okay. With that, I think we are ready to approve this evening's agenda.
I move to
Uh,
approve the agenda.
All right.
And I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Let's go out and do this. Okay. And I can report out on closed session that in closed session, the board did not take any action this evening. And the board will consider at the end of the meeting whether we want to return to closed session afterwards as well. Okay, and that brings us to the consent agenda. And please remember that board action to approve the items in the consent agenda is taken simultaneously with one motion, which is not debatable and requires a unanimous roll call vote for passage. The action indicated on each item is deemed to have been considered in full and action taken as worded therein. If a member of this board, the superintendent, or the public so requests, any item shall be removed from this section and placed on the regular order of business. The motion would be to waive the reading of the consent agenda, accept the reports, adopt the resolutions, and approve other items. Does anybody have an item that they wish to remove? And if not, do I hear a motion for approval?
Alan, can I ask a question just to make sure I understand? So if
Yes.
there's something I want to discuss, then we can pull it off and then vote for it later?
Yes, yes.
Okay, because I would like to look at the special ed. I just had some questions about that one, and there was another one, and I'll look for that in just a minute. Sorry.
All right, the special ed is number
It's 814.
814, okay.
Mhm.
And then Alan, I have a question. Are the new board members allowed to vote on the minutes if they weren't seated? Do they need to?
Right, yes, they should abstain from the minutes. So let us poll 8.2. Good point. Thank you. All right, and Shanice, was there another one that you wanted to address?
I think it's 814 and 815.
And 8:15, okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Ready for a motion?
Mhm.
I move to approve the consent calendar absent items 8.2, 8.14, and 8.15.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Carrie seconds. And may we have a roll call on this?
Student trustee Nori,
Yes.
trustee Ginn,
Yes.
trustee Dubois,
Yes.
trustee Stevenson,
Yes.
trustee Thompson,
Yes.
President Sarver.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, thank you. All right.
So do I go ahead and ask questions about this now?
No, we'll get to those in the action items
Oh,
down
okay,
below.
thank you.
All right. Student trustee comments. Trustee.
Thank you, President Sarver. So there isn't too much to report. It is finals week, so that brings along the stress that normally happens. It's also around the time when seniors start to hear back from some schools or finish up the last college application. So that also adds to the stress. But overall, I think people are excited for a 2-week break from school to recharge and hopefully start up again in the new year. On another note, the Superintendent's Advisory Commission, we are continuing to work on our project for the year, which was researching the feasibility of implementing something like what happened in Oakland called Measure QQ, which allowed high schoolers, specifically those 16 and older, to vote on school board elections. So we're working with the San Mateo County Youth Commission and other youth groups to try to figure out its feasibility in implementing something like that for the Sequoia Union High School District.
Excellent. Thank you. Are you finding this year's finals week to be dramatically more stressful, less stressful, or just very odd?
I'd say it's just very odd. Like even the schedule was kind of a little confusing in that like the classes, all the finals were like pretty out of order. But yeah, I think the actual tests themselves, just because by the nature of distance learning, have been different. And I'd say for the most part, they've been like easier than they normally would, but I don't think I can speak for everyone.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to have comments from the Sequoia District Teachers Association.
Hello, and on that same theme, I was just on another screen grading finals, which I am finding slightly more stressful because students, got confused about which areas to go to, and we've got to make more time for them to come back and fix things. But they all will get it fixed, and they all will get it right. Since we last spoke a week ago, nothing new on the SDTA front, except that we would very much like to welcome Shawnee's and Rich to the board and Carrie back to the board. We were excited to have people joining us who were interested in supporting coming together to make this the best experience possible for our students. And I am sure nobody missed the headlines about our fearless leader, Betsy DeVos, encouraging the Department of Education staff to resist, to be righteous and resist as the Biden folks may enter the building and do what's right for students in the face of whatever President-elect Biden might bring to the Department of Education. And I just wanted to thank everyone in this call and in the district and board members, past and present, who have been resisting things that have been coming to us from the federal and state governments that have not been in the best interest of students, and instead standing up for what is in the best interest of students. And along the lines of other things in the news, I just want to make sure I once, since I never ever say it, said Dr. McAvoy to Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Horton, do you have something to say on behalf of Ask Me?
I do. Good evening, everyone. And I just want to join everyone else by welcoming Shawnee's and Rich and Carrie. We always love to have Carrie. So thank you so much. Looking forward to working with the two new and the three that are still with us. So thanks for coming on board. Ask Me, what has Ask Me been working on? We have concerns and answering questions, a lot of questions still on COVID. So always looking forward to getting the COVID update from the district. Let's see what else. I just wrote down a few things so I don't forget. I want admin to feel comfortable with talking about things that can be done and things that cannot be done within our contract and what has been approved and adopted. So just looking forward to opening up those lines of communications. Want to make sure that we have friendly conversations and resolve everything up and front and center. So just a warm welcome on that. And today we opened up our voting for AFSCME members of OTMP and M&O bargaining units. Today we voted on ratifying the contract, and we want to thank again the district team for working on that quickly with us. We really appreciate it. And again, it's a nice holiday gift for everyone. Everyone was so happy. Excited to get that voted, and we'll get the certification of our votes to Jackie by our business agent, Joe Bates, I think by tomorrow. So nothing else on that, and an early Christmas for everyone.
Thank you very much. And again, congratulations to everybody who's been involved in negotiations this year. This has been quite a tumultuous period of time for the schools, and the great collaboration and the positive outcomes we're seeing are really valuable and really hopeful as we move forward. All right, this brings us to public comment. And again, as stated earlier, this is for items that are not on the agenda, and we will adjust any time allocated as necessary by the number of people indicating they wish to speak. So if anybody does wish to provide public comment on non-agendized items, please raise your blue Zoom hand at this time, and we'll go ahead and have time for comment. And at this point, I'm not seeing any hands go up. Give you another couple of seconds to find that there as a participant. And with the indication that we don't have public comment, for now, let's move on then to, we do not have information items this evening. So let's move to the first of our discussion items, the discussion of the board protocol for public communication. And Ms. Leach, I think that's on you.
Sure. As referenced in the governance handbook, it talks about in two areas how the board will communicate both with parents on matters within our community as well as media. Previously, there was a designated board member that would respond on behalf of the board, usually in collaboration with the superintendent position on responses and sharing of information. So I wanted to give the entire new board the opportunity to discuss who they would like to represent them in communication.
Well, since no one else is going, I think it should definitely be the board president along with the superintendent, and depending on the nature of the communication, the board president should loop in one other person, with the goal being to make sure that whatever they're saying best represents the whole board. And so it depends on the issue, but you want to make sure you kind of have at least, if it is something that is at all judgment in nature, you have the person most able to cover the widest range of opinion on the issue in the board president's judgment. So the board president with the super and one other, unless sometimes the board president just knows, is how I'd be interested. And I'd also just add, I think that every message that goes to the whole board should get a message by the person that we choose on behalf of the whole group, so that there are no messages that go unresponded.
I think one of the issues that has been raising some concern among board members recently is not having clarity as to whether the board spokesperson was responding to each and every message. So
I think you CC the other people unless that for some reason you feel that the nature of your Communication is expressing a personal opinion about a matter to come before the board in the future, which frankly probably should never, ever be the case in an email you're sending to the member of the public. So it would be, I would think you CC all their people. I mean, it could be a Brown Act violation if you wrote the
It is a
wrong
Brown
message.
Act. It is a Brown Act violation. I did check with county council.
Depends on the
So,
nature of the
and
communication, I
there is case law around that. So the way that we could do that is that the designated person, let's say if that's the board president, would loop me in, and then I would notify the rest of the board in the appropriate manner to share that information. A way around it is that if board members do decide to copy each other on emails, even if they do not reply, then those communications must be printed and attached to the following next board agenda.
So I have a question. So if, say, for instance, a person wants to email all of us, you know, I'm trying to figure out the essence of what people want. It's like, at least we received it, right? If not, we don't need to comment like, great idea, I agree with you, but we can say we received it. So is there another way that we can do that? Like say, for instance, at the City of Menlo Park, when they have, if you want to speak on a public item or you want to send something, you send it to this one email, that's more of a general email. And then that email is then documented into record with some confidentiality to it, like address and things of that sort, but then it's documented. Because I'm wondering if we just need to say we received it, you know?
Carrie?
Yes, I mean, that's what I do. So if I respond to everybody who writes me, whether they write me individually or whether they write the whole board. What concerns me about the way we've been operating, even though we delegate the president as the spokesperson, there are times the president has not gotten back to everybody, right? You know, when they're as diligent as the president can possibly be, right? So when we were receiving 200 letters a day, people were not being responded to. And even if it's form letters, it makes people feel bad. I mean, some are form letters, but there are other letters that people take a great deal of time crafting for us to read. And people feel like we're not reading them. So again, when I was in San Carlos, I knew that every letter we received as a board, at least 3 board members were responding to everyone, right? And I think we also had that rule that the board president was supposed to respond. But I was confident that every single letter was being responded to. On this board, I don't have that confidence. And I've heard lots of complaints about that. So I think I want to encourage everybody to write back. And then again, when there are these questions that I can't answer, like we've been talking a lot about that water polo question that came up. You know, I got a lot of emails from my community. Why did water polo stop? It would be helpful if I could get that answer so that we're all saying the same thing. And I don't know whether that would be in like maybe the weekly update from the superintendent, some of these more complicated answers, if we could receive that. I mean, would that work?
Is your proposal that, for example, Crystal tells us the answer, then all 5 of us respond with the answer?
No, it's fine that it's fine for, I want the board president to be the main spokesperson, talking to the press and writing, but I want to encourage everybody to write back as well. And I don't do long letters back. I just want people to know that I'm reading their letter. I'm hoping that at least 3 of us write back. I think the practice on this board is a majority of the board feels it's not their responsibility to write back because the president is going to write back. And I don't think that works very well because there are times when the president can't keep up with the volume.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective of being new to the board, but also one of the people who sent emails, is that I think there's 2 different reasons why people send emails. One is just to say, this is my input and I want you to hear. I don't necessarily need feedback. I just need you to know 100 people felt this way against this policy, right? That's one communication. Then there's communication of wanting a dialogue with one of the board members or some of the board members. And so I do think it gets a little tricky when you're trying to give input and what people expect in return. And what I realized when I got response from people was they could not agree or disagree with what I was saying. So what I realized is that I just had acknowledgement, right? Just acknowledgement that you received it and read it. And so I wonder if there is a way to do that, because it can be overwhelming. I mean, I just started and I was getting them before I even came on board. I'm like, what do I do with all these emails, right? So I just said, thank you. I just took Carrie's lead. And then some people I went a little bit deeper to ask more understanding, right? But I'm just wondering, what is the board culture around communication? Because I do know during this time of the pandemic and the crisis, we also have said in meetings that we need to bring our A game and bring up the communication so that people are feeling like they're part of and they have the knowledge, and not, for a lack of communication, people will come up with their own, they'll fill the gap. And that's not what we want. We want to fill the gap with what's the reality and what we're doing. So it's just something for us to think about.
So I think, we've talked about what is the culture, and it has been for it to be a primarily responsibility of the president, but it has been, I would say, very much up to individual choice about other board members responding. I've heard board members encouraging that other board members should at least acknowledge, to the extent possible, as at least an aspiration that all the board members should do that. I've also heard that the superintendent can share the president's responses with other board members if the superintendent is copied on those. I think that at this point would be very helpful in terms of the confidence level of all of the board members in knowing that the spokesperson for the board is responding to everything and what level of engagement is going on there. And I think we can also, when there is, when emails are raising questions where board members actually need more information, and they go to the superintendent to get more information, as a habit, that information should be shared with all of the board members, so that the way that that the board's ability to have the latest and most complete facts and speak with one voice is kept in line the best we possibly can.
I have one question. And this is for the board as well as primarily for Crystal, is I know that during hot topic times, I don't know what it looks like in regular season, but during these hot topic times, there's lots and lots of emails. And one of the questions, but also a concern I have, is how do we manage that communication so it's not overwhelming for Crystal, who's also doing CFO as well as interim superintendent role, as well. And I know she's working diligently to respond. She responded to me before I even thought about running, right? But I know there's lots of me's out there who were emailing and wanting that dialogue and relationship with the district. And so is it feasible that the superintendent can keep up that level of communication? Because I do want to heighten our communication, because I do think we need to be talking to our community more, but I also want to balance that with time and managing, especially during this pandemic where things are changing constantly.
So what we try to do to address people's questions that they have through communication is we do respond to every email. The length and time to respond to email will definitely depend on staff workload, right? Like, can I share that email with another staff member that they could possibly respond? And then in addition, we evaluate the emails that we're receiving, let's say in regard to COVID, right? And is that question that's being asked in that email, are they able to find that answer on the website, right? And so then we're constantly updating our website and updating our frequently asked questions. And so then when we respond, we can point them to the website, and then after they review, if the conversation would like to continue, we can do so. A lot of the communication that I've been receiving lately has been very, there's a lot of content around it, right? And it's really too much content for an email. You go back to your standard, how do you write an email? How long should it be? And so forth. And so, you know, I usually offer a couple of highlights, and then obviously offer my availability for a phone call to further have that conversation. It goes in cycles. It depends on the topic, depends on what's going on. It is definitely a staff's goal to respond to all the emails that we receive from our community.
So what you're saying is right now it's manageable.
Today, it is manageable.
Okay, thank you. So if it's manageable, then the direction is the board president will respond, and then if a family or person CCs all the board, we individually can say, we received your email, but with the expectation that the board or president or the superintendent will respond more thoroughly to them.
Right.
Okay, all righty.
All right, are we comfortable with this one then?
And then just addition, if you receive an email, Singleton, without copying of the superintendent, if it's appropriate to share with me, I would also ask that you share with me so that I can offer further assistance if need be.
Alan, did you see that Edith's hand is up? And
I did not, thank you.
okay, and I'm wondering, should we be using the hand or doing it the way we're doing it? So I think we're just speaking when we want to speak. Is that working for you?
It's working okay.
Okay.
You know, hands also, the electronic hand also helps. And my ability to see it also helps. So thank you for pointing that out. And I would like to hear from Ms. Salvatore.
I don't know how relevant it is now that you've come to a decision, but I did want to give the feedback that over the summer when our members were deluging you with emails, I can tell you that to a member who spoke to me about it, it was distressing to them that they received a response from only one board member or at times two board members, and that there were definite assumptions being made on the part of some members that it was the two female board members who took the time to respond and male board members did not. And it made our members feel that their concerns were not being listened to, were not being considered, and were being dismissed. And so, you know, people aren't happy with a form letter response, but if there had been a response that simply said, thank you for your letter, we've take the time to read all of them, we can't discuss these matters outside of the board room, I think that at least would have shown that it had been opened up and received.
Thank you. Okay, and I trust that will be part of everybody's thinking as well going forward. Okay, on that note, I would like to suggest that we take a brief recess before we move on to the rest of our items. We've been at it for just about 2 hours plus closed session. So I have 7:48 here let's aim for a 7-minute break and try and get back at 7:55. Does that sound reasonable? Okay. With that, 7-minute recess.
Carrie, what time do we come back? Oh, I can't hear you.
Now.
Oh,
Now.
okay. All right, thank you.
All right. It looks like a lot of us are back. Okay. Our board is present here, so let's get back at it. And we go on to item 13.2, this week's COVID update. Interim Superintendent Leach, would you like to go?
Yes, thank you, President Sarver. As the board had requested a few meetings back, that is standing update as part of the COVID update would be on attendance and engagement. So we do have Dr. Diana Wilmot here for us to provide us an update on attendance and engagement. Dr. Diana, are you with us? There you are.
I am. So you guys gave me just enough time to light the 7 night of Hanukkah candles. So thank you. Perfect amount of time on the
And
break.
gobble down a latke, I hope.
Yeah, there were a few. There were a few along the way. So yes, I wanted to.
Did we leave you? Did we leave you enough time to also light the candle on your battery operated sweater?
No, not tonight. Just, I'm not wearing that one tonight. I am sharing the PowerPoint, the PDF that I shared with you all. I think you can see it, right? Yes. Would it be better if I did it in share mode? I think it's fine as a PDF. So I wanted to just review the absence rate of our students who have since joined the academic bubble cohort. It was an interest since the last several reports we've done. Over the last several months, we've been reporting about attendance and engagement. So these are the different data pulls that I've done over the last few months and reported back to the board in either board updates or in actual presentations. And so I just wanted to kind of review and welcome to Shanice and I forget your name. I can't see it on the board.
Rich.
Rich, thank you. Sorry, I went into share mode, but I wanted to just give a little historical context from the last few board meetings on what's been reported. So in September, we reported about the students who are missing more than 50% of their class periods. We were basing it off of some concern that if the engagement need to be reported at the state level around missing 60%. So we went with something even a little bit more all-encompassing and went with 50% just to kind of capture as many kids as we could at the very beginning of the year to see if there were kids that were not connecting or anything or not fully participating and trying to identify the needs there. We found some overrepresented groups in that data, in that absence data, students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, males, seniors, et cetera. And we started to kind of dive down into the data as we went through this work. So in October, I reported and started to look at students and their Q1 grades had been released. And we started to look at students who were logging into Zoom and how many NPs they had on the report card, and for Rich and Shanice, that is not fully participating as a comment by the teachers. So we were able to count the number of NPs. They would do a weekly participation comment within our student information system. So we were looking at that to see if there were students that were showing up but not fully participating or not showing up turning in work. We were trying to identify the students in that kind of area and identify different metrics for data, engagement data. And then we looked at the comparison in the Q1 grades for those students. There were nearly 10% more students with more than one D or F this year compared to last year. So that was of interest and concern for us. We started to look more deeply into that work and had conversations with principals and teachers as well. And we noticed that there were students who were receiving Ds and Fs, but they were attending more than 80% of their classes. So there were kids who were logging in and attending, but there was some concern that they were still struggling. And so Q1 being thankfully a kind of more of a warning instead of a final grade, which is our first semester grade that usually appears on the transcript. It only matters really for PE when it's a quarterly grade here. So in essence, we were giving an earlier warning sign to students about bringing up their grades, and it's finals week, so I hope they're doing better. So November 18th, we did a different dive into the data a little bit. We looked at what really is the relationship between attendance and grades. We were looking at scatter plots and doing a little regression analysis and noticing that there is a reasonably strong relationship between attendance and Q1 GPA, but there were still many student outliers, and there are more variables that are needed to explain the variance in the GPA. And today I'm taking you through the data that I ran last week on December 9th about looking at the students who joined the bubble cohort and who looking at their daily absent rate. And I chose to use the daily absent rate because it is a state level SARB metric. After speaking with Carrie about this and it being talked about here at the board meeting, if a student is missing 10% of their school, their daily absence, then it's a cause for concern. So given that this academic bubble cohort was really geared towards students who were not connecting to school, were struggling in classes, this is even like kind of a more a stronger warning if they were not coming to any period at all. So that's what our daily absence rate is. If you're absent for if you're absent for all the periods in an entire day, you're considered to be absent. If you showed up at one period, then you're considered to be present. So these kids that we're looking at here, we're looking at their absence rate. So there are 256 students in the academic bubble cohort. They were invited to join. 106 joined in October, 127 joined in November, and at the time when I ran this report on December 9th, we had 21 who joined in December. 200 of these 256 students had 2 or more D or Fs on their Q1 grades, again, speaking to the fact that we were reaching out to kids who were struggling academically and needed some support. You could see by the distribution across the sites that pretty representative of all of the schools that have reached out to kids and tried to pull them in for support. It is overrepresented by males, 157 versus 99 females, but we saw originally back in September, this subgroup of students was overrepresented by males, so it made sense to reach out to them. And in addition, 162 out of the 256 students were socioeconomically disadvantaged, which is, again, overrepresented compared to our entire district population, but it made sense given how they were overrepresented in the absence group as well. And lastly, again, seniors here, 82 seniors was a cohort of students that were reached out to out of the 256. A little bit overrepresented here, but again, they appeared to be overrepresented in the absence data. We want to make sure that they get their courses done. So So I'm going to take us through, and is this working for you guys? The PDF, it's okay? It's the PowerPoint, same idea. Found it first. So first I want to report that of these 256 students, their daily absence rate before joining a cohort was a little over 10%, which again is cause for alarm because that is the metric that the state uses at the SARB level for students who are chronically absent. Once joining the cohort, that rate did decrease below the 10% mark, down to 7.37. It went down 2.8% for all students in the cohort. And then I started looking at it, kind of slicing and dicing. Okay, what happened if they joined in October? What happened if they joined in November? And which groups of students really seemed to show the greatest impact? It showed the greatest impact for. So first in October, November, I didn't have enough data for December to really show a change because there was only 9 days in December when I ran it. But whether they joined in October or they joined in November, you could see the kids in November had an 11% daily absence rate. Those 127 kids, it dropped down to 8.27%. So in both months when they joined the cohort, it made a difference. I assume December will show the same, but I won't know until I see the data for December. Sophomores and seniors showed the greatest rate of improvement, but all grades are making progress. So you could see the ones that we were most concerned about, the seniors, had over 13.43% absence rate before joining the cohort, and now they've dropped down to 10.43%. So they've dropped down 3%. More work to do here with just straight seniors. The 9th, 10th, and 11th graders, while they weren't up there in the 10%, they did drop down considerably for each of them when joining the cohort. So the students with 2 or more D's or F's at quarter 1, sophomores really knocked it out of the park. Again, they were up there at 11%. This is narrowing it down. So looking at the 50 sophomores, before it was 61 sophomores. So of those 50 of them had 2 or more D's or F's, and those 50 dropped their absence rate down to 4.9%. So more than half, they dropped their absence rate. And I think that is something to celebrate. And the seniors also showed a more dramatic drop than, say, the juniors or the freshmen. So then I also looked at those males, the 157 males that were represented in the bubble cohort. 28 juniors who were male showed 5% improvement in the absence rate. And knowing that overall that absence rate drop was 2.8%, anything that's over that I'm feeling like is a significant difference from just the general overall average. I'm looking for kids that are really pulling through, using this opportunity to show up at more classes and more schooling. And the seniors, unfortunately, those males, it looks as if the females made the bigger difference here for the seniors in their big drop that we saw earlier, because of the males in the senior class that came, they didn't have quite the same improvement rate. Now, if we look at the students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged in this group, their average absence rate went down by 4.85%. Again, that's more than the overall average of 2.8%. They were up there close to 12%, dropped down below that critical 10% number, down to 7%. Okay, I'm trying to find, okay, 96 male socioeconomically disadvantaged students improved their absence rate by 4.5%. So again, I'm really trying to peel apart the data and try to understand which kids are really, it's working for, we're going after, and which ones we need to keep bringing into these opportunities to bring their absence rate down. And so These students improved by 4.5%. Okay. So then we had 96 students who were male and socioeconomically disadvantaged. The most dramatic absence rate was on the juniors. Again, there's 18 of them. Then they started to come, primarily really dropping their absence rate down from 12.63% to 2.5%. And then the 68 students who are male, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and receiving 2 or more D's and F's. And this is where we started to see a little bit more of an impact on those male seniors. They were struggling in their classes and they were socioeconomically disadvantaged. We see that drop from 11 to 5%. Juniors went from 12 to 3%. So I think that this is definitely one of those target groups we talked about. The males were overrepresented, they're socioeconomically disadvantaged, and they were struggling in 2 or more classes. All of these groups dramatically dropped their, especially the juniors and seniors, brought down their absence rate considerably. Freshmen a little less so, but they're getting there. And it's small numbers here, so 1 or 2 kids makes a big difference here. So my reflections are students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged are improving in absence rate as a result of participating in the academic bubble cohort. Males are participating in the cohort bubble and it's driving improvement in absence rate for all, but juniors are showing the greatest improvement. Students continue to improve in their absence rate whenever they join the cohort, be it the first month, the second month. We'll see what happens with the third month. Sophomores with 2 or more D and F improve the greatest in their absence rate. We need to continue to target socioeconomically disadvantaged males and seniors. And we need to continue to study the impact of the bubble cohorts in January, comparing quarter and semester grades, as well as start to look at their period attendance rate. Maybe there's particular classes that they're attending more than others. I know that I've heard a few reflections so far about, attending or physically looking at some of the classrooms and not seeing as many kids. And, I'll speak to that. I know that it might be of interest, but I think just the mere fact that these kids were invited to participate in a cohort, knowing that we're there and we care about them, impacted their desire to show up at school, be it in person or on Zoom, and their absence rate went down in general. That's it for now. Is there too much background noise or everybody can hear me?
That's
Okay.
great.
Good.
Are there questions and comments from the board?
I have a few.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I sent these in advance, but I just wanted to publicly ask them as well. When we're looking at the attendance, first of all, I just have lots of questions because I know that the data says that attendance is doing really well, but I know it varied when we went and visited some of the learning hubs. So I just have questions about how to rectify some of that information a little bit more. But how are we keeping data of the attendance teams are very robust or becoming more robust, and the sites also ask for more support around that. And they're spending a lot of time getting kids to attend, which is important because if you don't attend, then you don't learn. And so, but they're keeping this anecdotal information as to why kids are not showing up. So even though the data shows one thing, you still have kids who are not showing up for school for various reasons. And so I'm wondering, that anecdotal information of I'm sick or I'm working or whatever, how are we gathering that information so that we can strategize around some of the real issues that kids are facing? Then my next question is, Do we know if the students who had a decrease in their attendance had strong connections within the learning hub? So for example, I went to one site and it was students who already knew each other because they were part of the English language learner group. And so their attendance was really good, but they also had some level of social connection. Whereas some other cohorts I went to, it was just like independent study in a classroom, right? Because everybody has their own personalized schedule. So just wondering about that correlation. I have all these questions, so I'll slow there. And then I have like just one more.
So I don't know if I have the answer, if anyone, if you want to chime in, I'm sure, or any of the principals. Oh yeah, look, the principals are here. This is great. I'm sure they have a lot more to answer on, especially on the anecdotal piece, their intervention counselors and what they're doing to keep track of students.
I can speak a little bit about the connection that some of the students had with each other prior to the cohorts. We created a couple of AVID cohorts specifically for that. So they already had a community and they already knew each other, so they'd be more comfortable being in the same room with each other. So 2 of our cohorts were AVID cohorts, 9th and 10th, and then 10th and 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th. So that answers that a little bit. The other cohorts we had, the English learner cohort, obviously they all knew each other. They're a little family, they're a community. The STARS cohort, they knew each other. They're already familiar with each other and they're friends with each other during regular school as well. The other cohorts were not so much tied to an existing community or an existing relationship they had with each other. So that speaks to those a little bit. You know, when you walked around, visited the sites, the lack of attendance there, I think, is different than the lack of attendance or the attendance that Diana was referring to. The attendance that she's referring to was the synchronous attendance in Zoom classes. So what she was indicating was there was an increase in Zoom attendance. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Diana, but you were referring to the Zoom attendance as a result of the cohort participation. And your attendance rates were not calculating the cohort attendance, only the Zoom synchronous classroom attendance. Is that correct?
Right. We're looking at whether or not they showed up in instruction. So not whether or not they showed up at the academic cohort. It happens that students who were involved in the academic cohort, I don't know what day they showed up at that thing, that experience, but their overall attendance in class seemed to improve, or their absence rate went down. However,
because those are 2 different pieces of data that we're collecting, and those pieces of data are not commingled. So the data she was giving was just in your regular attendance for classes.
That helped me. Thank you. Go ahead.
I think you're absolutely have hit the nail on the head that in the cohorts where kids already had relationships with each other and with the staff member, it makes a big difference, right? Like we all do better when we're known. And those have definitely been the warmest cohort experiences. I would also say that I see attendance being physical attendance at the cohorts being way down after Thanksgiving. I went to a site last week where the room had been full the week before, COVID full. All of the kids were there when I talked to the teacher the week before Thanksgiving, and there were 2 kids in the room. And it's gotten colder. There are more people sick. I don't know what is happening. I mean, and Diana said to me last week, she said, I have to do this presentation now because I don't want to give the board stale data. And I said, it's only 1 more week. But now I see her point, as I usually do, in that I'm not sure about what their attendance data looks at this point. And then you also made a comment about the attendance still not being stellar. And we totally agree. So the kids who were invited with their kids, primarily who are most struggling in a district of 9,000 plus kids to make it. So 10% attendance is bleak, according to us and the state, but it's a lot better than 14% attendance.
Absence rate, 10% absence rate, not attendance.
Okay.
It's 90% attendance.
My bad.
Okay. So that's good to hear. And I guess that leads to another question. One is just, what is social economic disadvantage? I want to know what does that include? And then the other one is, if their attendance improve, what's going on with the grades? Did they improve in their grades? Like, that's really why we want kids there, right? Not just to lay eyes on you, but for your academic growth. So I'm trying to figure out, like, did they grow?
Stay tuned.
So
We don't
yeah,
know. Go ahead, Diana. Sorry.
no, that's what I was going to say, that we're going to study that in January when we see their grades for the first semester. That will be our next engagement criteria. And then I was just pulling up to clear up what socioeconomic disadvantage is. It's either it's either low income or fewer years of formal education, as you know. So if the family did not graduate from college, that's how it's socioeconomically disadvantaged is defined.
And that's your definition, or is that a federal definition?
State, federal.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wonder
it's
what
typically used at the state level. It's defined. So rather than reporting on just not the National School Lunch Program students, would be how we identify the low income students, and then when we gather parent education level, so it's one or the other combined, is identified as SED.
Okay. I just do wonder about attendance overall, and I know that our schools are doing a lot of work to get the kids show up at school for the learning pods and to improve their attendance, to improve their grades. And so I just want to know some of the anecdotal kinds of things, if there's some way we can do that consistently. I can't give direction, I'm not the only one, but it's just one of the things I'm curious about so that we can problem solve.
And so you're meaning taking attendance of the kids showing up at the learning hub itself, as opposed to showing up online.
Right, and why they're not showing up. I think Zoom is really hard, but I think we have more insight into the kids if they're coming to the learning hubs, insight into their lives.
You know, I have a suggestion to maybe collect some of that data is have the AVPs, when the AVPs meet, they can create maybe a Google form, or they can talk about those reasons, because I know that they're documenting those reasons whenever they make a phone call, whenever our team makes a phone call, they're documenting why students aren't coming and the reasons they're giving. So I can see that becoming a standardized form across the district if the AVPs get together. I'm sure that they can try and come up with a form that works for everybody.
That's a great idea. Thank you, Ralph. The other, idea we could consider is doing a focus group or of those students who've been invited, or who've been invited and stayed, or invited and not stayed, and do a little bit of a panel on just those students to tell them we want their feedback and we want to get input from them. So that's another way just to provide some context around what we're seeing physically at the sites. But I do think that there's something to be said about students just being invited to participate in the cohort and then showing up online because they know that somebody's there and somebody cares. That building that relation. I think a lot of times kids do things for we adults because they like us or they like a particular teacher. So it's having that connection, having that reach out makes a big difference, and having a place for them to go. Certainly, even if they came once and got that question answered that they need to get answered, or got that whether it was a tech issue or anything, to then go home and go get online and be on that class the next time because they know that they're expected to.
Okay,
So,
other board member.
I don't have the actual answers, but those are some ideas.
Great. Other board member comments or questions? Okay. All right. I would just throw in kind of my observations that, I think what I saw out of that data is that the very hard work that we know is going into selecting the right students to be participating, those with the greatest needs and the greatest gains to be made, are paying off in who is coming in. To that comment about the attendance data looks really good, and I saw everybody kind of shaking their head a little bit at that. What it really looks like is it's substantially less worser than it was as a result. So what we are seeing is that we have moved from a very, very bad situation to a significantly less bad, but still distressing level. So these are important things. What we're checking at this point is, what is the effectiveness of the steps we're taking? What do we need to be doing more of? Where are we doing it right? Where do we need to continue changing, but where do we need to be expanding out? And this gives us a clear indication that there's real value in continuing to try to expand our cohort availability along the lines that we've been pursuing, and where we can be pulling students in as communities, and where we can be pulling them into their interests, to their passions, and to a socially and emotionally welcoming environment. It's going to continue to have the biggest impact. So I see a lot of validation of which groups we're looking at, who we're going after, where the need is, and the way that it's working on the groups that we're bringing in. So I really do appreciate the presentation, and it really tells me a lot about where we're going. Clearly, we're also seeing, and we saw it all in the classrooms that all of the board members went and toured, we are witnessing the biggest peak to date in the pandemic. And our neighborhoods, and especially these neighborhoods of students in the greatest need, are being hammered. And there is danger and fear out there. And we've heard anecdotal stories of various individual students and various groups of students deciding that it wasn't safe or appropriate to continue being on campus, even though there were these benefits they had been seeing. So that will continue to be a balance that we're really looking at over at least the coming month of school, the beginning of the second semester. If community-wide behavior is not substantially more careful around the upcoming winter break than it was around either Halloween or Thanksgiving, as Dr. Scott Morrow said earlier today, then you ain't seen nothing yet. So we can hope that our words to the community to be careful, to stay home, to keep your mask on and keep your distance, to not throw it all out the window to get a large group of family together over the holidays. We can hope that that advice is taken and we don't see a much greater spike in January. But every indication is that we're likely to have a very tough period for students choosing to take advantage of the opportunities to be on campus at the kind of rates we would like to see. And so being able to look at these things and saying, all right, the mixing in of being on campus that we've achieved has had an impact also on their attendance in the Zoom lessons, that they're spending more time tuned in from home because of the contact and the engagement that they've had. So every bit of the exposure we can manage adds positive value out there. even if there are challenging times mixed in. So this was a very, very valuable presentation for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
The second part of the COVID update is pretty quick, as far as we had the extensive study session last week regarding current operations, and then also moving forward. As stated last week, our reopening plan was submitted to the County Office of Ed on December 4th. We have not heard anything back from the county at this time. I do have a standing superintendent's high school related meeting tomorrow morning. So I will also be able to check in and see an update on the review of our plan.
Great, thank you for that. Just before then we leave this update, another opportunity, panelists or other attendees with more questions or comments.
I'll just make one small comment. I think it's clear, and as you stated, that the cohorts are helping the students that are chosen to attend the cohort. I think in the short term, the spiking COVID cases probably makes, I'm not sure how people will go to them, but as soon as as soon as relief comes, I think being able to have as many as we can, and anything the board can do in terms of helping recruit volunteers, putting in place whatever we need to get volunteers, allocating money to hire people. It seems like we need, I'm going to call them classroom monitors. I don't know what you would call them, so that more cohorts can happen. I know at least one of the schools that I toured, inability to find people was a limiting factor. So more students could be benefiting from something that we've just learned benefits, but there weren't enough classroom monitors. So it'd be nice to get more classroom monitors however we could get them. I think everyone knows that, but I think that's my takeaway from this.
Mhm. And I would second that, but also add that I think we also need to think about the kids that seemingly don't need it. That I think there are some kids where there are some private issues going on around mental health, around socialization, that we need to start thinking about. And even though they haven't exposed themselves to us and we know exactly who they are out there. And so I think we do need to think about the ones who we may not think need to be there as well. So just trying to balance that out a little bit with our population.
Okay. All right. With that, let's move on to our list of action items. Thank you very much for those presentations. And the first of our action items, 14.1, is approval of the superintendent search firm to oversee the superintendent selection process. And Interim Superintendent Leach, if you'd like to lead off on that.
Sure. So let me go ahead and grab my notes. So back November 18th, which was actually not that long ago, that actually feels like an eternity. We had 3 search firms come and provide presentations over how, what and how their process is handled as far as a search, providing a search for the next superintendent of our district. So we had Hazard, Young, and Atia, McPherson and Jacobson, and Leadership and Associates. So at that time, we were aware that we were going to have 2 new board trustees joining us. And so we wanted to make that decision on who that search firm would be after they were sworn in, so that they could be an active decision maker on who the board chooses for that contract firm. So there are their presentations and proposals are attached within this item as well.
Great. And I'd like to frame it a little bit and lead up to a suggestion. We've certainly been through an interesting period of time. We began by looking at the schedule that we followed 4 years ago in our last hiring cycle, and got off to an early start in the year and tried to emulate that. This time, we saw that the transition of the new governance team really was going to come up in a certain level of conflict with moving at the same rate of speed that we had in the past. Our two new board members reached out to the board to say, please don't hold up the process waiting for us. And so we proceeded with the presentations, but did hold off on the decision. So really what we've ended up doing is having a single split presentation and action, with the action part of it delayed by a month until tonight. And I know that all 5 of the board members were active participants in the meeting of the presentation and did a lot of evaluation and thought. These 3 firms seem to stand head and shoulders above the field as the firms that are called in again and again and again in all of the districts that we're aware of in the region. I think that our past board, myself from this past presentation, and what I've learned of other boards talking with these groups, have a strong feeling that any one of the 3 is completely capable of leading a very effective superintendent search and touching all of the bases of doing it in a very strong manner. And in all likelihood, this board is down to a point of kind of nitpicking and using personal impressions to look at very subtle pluses and minuses between 3 very good and capable organizations to make their decision. And I would like to try and start this process with an opportunity to not actually put that nitpicking on display and go into ground that would be uncomfortable and not real productive for the firms that have applied for this opportunity, and see whether my colleagues have had a chance to more or less sort in their own head how they would rank the companies in terms of first, second, and third preference, and be willing to start off stating your first preference that you already have and see if there's actually a consensus among that impression on which we can act. And then, if we don't have that, go into a little bit more depth of our process.
For what it's worth, I support that approach and know what I would pick. So I'm interested to hear from our colleagues.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with that being the way we start this off? Okay, well, Rich, since you spoke up, who would be your choice?
McPherson.
Okay.
And my choice is McPherson. See, we weren't going to be nitpicky. We're not always nitpicky, and we're only nitpicky about certain things.
Yeah. Okay. Shawnice, do you have a choice?
My choice is Leadership Associates, and then my second choice is McPherson.
Okay, Chris?
This will be fun. But one, I want to reiterate that I agree with you, Alan, that they're all strong and they all do a fine job for us. I do think there are some specific strengths that each of them have that wouldn't be nitpicking. My first choice is Leadership Associates. That puts it at 2 and 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would say my first choice narrowly was McPherson, and Leadership a close second. So that's 3-2, and I have somewhat of a feeling that most everybody had the other one as second. But I would make the suggestion that we would go with McPherson on that recommendation of the group and ask whether there is then objection to that.
I would like to have some type of discussion about it, just because I there's some particular things I was looking at leadership associate where I felt McPherson didn't have, and it wasn't clear. And so if it's okay, I'd at least like to say my argument for leadership associate. That would be, I'm trying not to
Yeah,
be
of course.
feisty tonight,
Of course
but
you can.
Yeah,
I'd like
that
to
sounds
share.
good. Yeah, I think that would be very productive to hear.
Okay. One of the reasons why I was looking at leadership associate as the forefront, there were a couple of things that I liked about them. One is their diversity, their diverse perspective, and working with our community. With our goals of being equity, as well as some of the push from our communities, whether it's internal with staff or whether it's community, we really do need to have a strong person who understands that and knows when a person who we're trying to interview or select or bring forward is not just using jargon, but they really understand it instinctually, experientially for our community. The second thing that I liked about them was that they actually can lead a community engagement piece of it. And they can work with diverse populations. If we're trying to reach out to Pacific Islanders who are in families, to engage them into our community based off the data that we know about them, or our English language learners, then we need people who can speak their language. And I'm not just talking about Spanish and Tongan, I'm just talking about how a community operates. So that's another reason. The other reason why I really like them, and I'm always thinking about the impact of how we do this search and how it could be very, it can be very overwhelming, is that they did have an administrative assistant with them who works with the administrator. And I think with Laura being new, this is her first year, really having her own support system there would actually be helpful. So we're not just doing a process, we're also growing our staff. And so that's what helped me see them differently than McPherson. I think McPherson has this governance piece that I think would be interesting, but I also think we could look at CSBA to do that work. So my strongest argument is for leadership associates because of the community that we serve.
So I have a question, just to make sure I'm remembering correctly. So the reason I was impressed with McPherson is because they had that equity angle. They were the one, am I remembering this correctly? They were the one tied in to Nicole Anderson, right? And we've worked with Nicole Anderson. McPherson is the one that is tied in to CSBA, right? So they're the new and fresh firm in my mind. I have worked with both of the other firms. And as far as the community engagement, they're all fairly similar, right? So it means the community meetings, which I've observed, but I'm right. It's Nicole Anderson is McPherson.
Yeah. And I like Nicole. I actually have my notes here. I said Nicole's role should be separate, but appreciate that they brought her in as an equity lens. And so it to me, that's different. I think they are growing. They brought an expert in. She feels comfortable with them. She vouches for them. And there is a difference between, they didn't really talk about language. They really didn't talk about, they said, oh, we just have access. And I said, great. Whereas leadership associates, we saw the faces and we saw the names. And that makes a big difference for me.
Can I so add that I find Shanice's arguments totally compelling, but I guess I was already there beforehand. But the only thing I'd add is Nicole was a plus for me, but frankly, I didn't quite understand the role she'd play because I think she's been quite effective working in the board. On the other hand, we have had at least one chance to work with Eric Andrew at Leadership Associates. And the experience we had at the retreat, I thought he was very compelling and would work effectively for us. That's the only thing I'd add to Shanice's helpful statements.
Okay. Other thoughts from anybody? Certainly to me, I mean, both of those sets of points were what had gone through my head. And I think the balance that put me narrowly in the McPherson camp was the strong CSBA connection. But I also felt that leadership highlighted CSBA connections as well, and that they work very closely that way as well. So for me, it was not a great distinction. I felt that I would be very comfortable with either of those groups. So again, Rich, maybe I turn to you. Did you have a strong sense of?
No, I was second. I mean, I think I was second with leadership.
All right. So, I mean, I'm hearing it's evenly split and not really particularly intense on one side of the fence or the other. I did feel, Shawnee's was passionate and compelling in her reasoning and drew a strong distinction that resonates with me. So I think, given my narrow inclinations in the beginning, I would be willing to switch over to the leadership camp and be happy with that. And I don't think I'm hearing substantial resistance one way or the other. Carrie, does that feel?
You don't want me to be nitpicky. We've used leadership before, really. I'd rather not do that again.
We Sequoia haven't used Leadership Associates.
Yeah, I've used them before.
Not.
Yeah, I think the key is, who is the consultant going to be?
And we had the three teams present to us. You know, they all indicated clearly that the people that spoke with us were the team that we would work with.
All three groups said that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm more comfortable with McPherson. So.
Okay, so here I am, having been wishy-washy.
Three people can, I mean, if there's three votes, there's three votes, but I mean,
yeah. All right.
So you're the third vote, Alan. If that's
yeah. All right. So at this point, yeah, let me call that for a vote. Those people that are in favor of Leadership Associates being the consultant that we work with, please raise your hands. Okay. Those that prefer McPherson? Yeah. Okay. So let's go with that as a 3-2.
Okay.
I think we'll move along with that. So this puts us on a march forward that adds, or doesn't add, but reveals another layer to the plate load that our governance team has. And from the working schedules that the various groups presented to us, within days after a selection, the first step is a meeting between the board and the consulting team to lay out the overall detailed schedule and plan the next steps. And in particular, that meeting in short order puts them in a position to be able to arrange all of the community input gathering as the next major step. And to me, I would like to see that be able to occur over the next few days so that something can happen during the winter break and everybody can hit the ground running in January. So we have actually, 5 working days through next Wednesday in the district where classrooms are not open. So I would recommend that we try to ask the superintendent to reach out and notify leadership of the selection to see if we can arrange a meeting. If we find that it's particularly challenging to arrange a meeting that has the entire board in it, perhaps the superintendent and president and one other representative could work with the representatives of the consultant group to at least move the next steps forward. But I'd kind of poll the rest of the board for availability over the coming 5 work days to have an opportunity to arrange. I don't know if it's something that would be as little as an hour or might need to be a little bit longer. That would be part of the feedback we'd want to get from leadership when we contact them.
So we're talking schedules now?
Yeah.
I'm fine, except for tomorrow. So Friday or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Okay. That's similar for me.
Same for me.
So the schedule option is this week. Next week would be best for me. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is fine with me.
Okay. Carrie, how does that sound for you?
What time were you thinking?
Well, I think we'll probably need to do some doodle polling or just questioning to get to that. What are better times for you?
So Monday is not good for me. So yeah, Tuesday or Wednesday I can make work.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like
are there
Tuesday.
any times to avoid, or basically Tuesday, Wednesday, anytime for no more than 2 hours, I'd say?
That works
Good?
for me.
Thumbs up, thumbs up. Yeah, okay.
Excellent. And I will actively support you any way I can in getting that going.
I'm sorry, just for me on Tuesday afternoon would be best, anytime after 12. Other than that, I'm available all the other days, anytime.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. Thank you. All right, so we can move on to action item 14.2, second reading and adoption of revised board bylaw 9321 and deletion of board bylaw 9321.1.
Yes, so this was brought last week for the first reading, and so this is the second reading of this board policy. But as we have 2 new board trustees joining us, we wanted to give an opportunity to have a conversation about this if need be. So this is, to summarize, this is the CSBA cleanup where they condensed a couple of board policies, cleaned up some duplications between the previous 2 board policies. This board policy covers closed session, purposes, agendas, actions, and reports. So the rules, right, of process and protocol around closed session, reporting out, and how to agendize items.
Is there a reason you chose not to put this on consent versus the other ones that you did?
The reason at the last board meeting, former trustee Alan Weiner and with these trustees thought that it would be better to have it as an actionable item since we have 2 new trustees. Other than that, no.
I have no comments.
Okay.
Me either.
All right. With that, if there are no other comments,
Approve item 14.2.
there we go. Do we have a second?
And I'll second.
Second.
Okay. Carrie beat you. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Opposed? No. Okay. So that is approved. All right. Agenda item 14.3, consideration of nominations for elected members of the CSBA Delegate Assembly.
Yes, so in past years, I want to say I'm looking at my notes for a few years, Trustee Dubois has served as the representative for the elected members for the CSBA delegate. And so this action item would call for her nomination to serve in this role. Again, I believe the term is 2 years, starting April 1st of 2021, going through March 31st of 2023.
Carrie, is there anything you want to say about it?
Yeah, I've been a member of Delegate Assembly for a long time, like 15 years. I do enjoy it. It means going to twice a year to meetings, and I haven't missed one. So I enjoy my participation. I'd like to continue. Some people like the Delegate Assembly and some people don't. We've had other people join and not last. So I do enjoy it. So I want to keep going. So I need a nomination from a board. It always works better if it's my own board. And then there's still an election. So all of the board members from the county will decide who they actually want on Delegate Assembly. I think there are 3 open seats. Or 3 seats to choose from. And a couple of members are not running again. So we'll see who ends up on the slate at a later time. So this is just my board nominating me.
I would be happy to nominate Carrie Dubois.
I'd be happy to get a second. I want that second.
Okay, Chris can have it. Chris seconded it.
I also want to add that as a member of the Delegate Assembly, Carrie also led the annual education conference for the CSBA quite successfully one year. It's a big job.
Thank you, Carrie.
All right. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay.
Congratulations, Carrie.
You are nominated.
Yay.
Okay, we have 3 more action items that were pulled from the consent calendar. First was approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting on November 18th. And that was pulled because 2 of our board members were not board members at that meeting. And we would want them to abstain. So if there are no other comments on it, I'll accept a motion for approval.
Move approval of the minutes.
And a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any noes?
Aye.
There's an aye. Okay. Any noes? Any abstentions?
Aye.
2 abstentions. Okay. So passed 3-0 with no abstentions. Okay. Agenda item 8.14, adoption of the board policy and AR 6159.1, safeguards and complaints for special education. Shanice, would you like to lead some questions?
Yes. So Bonnie, maybe you can explain the context of this first before I ask my question. Is that okay?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the context of the first addition language that's been added to 6159.1 is they're trying to stem the floodgate of special ed cases that are ending in contentious manners by setting up a separate from the due process, setting up an additional process that SPED families can take an advantage of to try and settle differences at a less dramatic level initially, to see if a district and the concerned family can come to a consensus. It just gives more latitude. So there are two pieces to it. There's one piece that is required, and then there's another piece that is not. The first piece is a mediation meeting, and then the second piece is a resolution session. And our district always offers a mediation session because we have found that to be very helpful. We are already doing everything that this updated BP/AR is now putting into Ed Code.
Okay, so then my question is, and you might have answered this already, what will the board learn about these? Okay, this is 8.4, correct? Is that what I'm looking at?
Yes, 814, yeah.
Okay, so then my question is, will the board learn about these new, is this about complaints, correct? So I'm sorry, I'm a little slow. Will the board learn about these new complaints in special ed if we have these different processes, or how does the board get involved in all that?
The goal is to get as few complaints to you as possible because we satisfy our customers before it gets to your level.
Okay.
If we don't succeed in that, then you hear about them every time.
Okay. All right. So it doesn't really take away from the family's rights. It gives them other options to resolve the conflict.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I just had questions about, I know what the law is and how does this fit into this. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Shanice, you want to make a motion to approve it?
Oh, yes. I'll make the motion to approve it.
Do we have a second?
I'm overly seconding tonight, but I'll second.
Okay.
I think I've seconded everything.
All those in favor, vote aye.
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 Okay. And 8.15, what is that? NPSA was the acronym?
Non-public secretary in school and agency services.
Okay.
Can you provide more context to this one? I was trying to figure out in the context of Sequoia, what does this mean?
Yes, so what this means is, and we again are already following everything that has now been concretized with this document in Ed Code. But what it means is if you get to a point where you decide that you cannot provide a fair education for your kids in need of services in the public setting, then you don't just get to settle with the family and then we'll see you when and if you come back. This concretizes that districts are responsible for visiting a placement before any student is ever put there. And that we're responsible for visiting kids who are there for any certain length of time. So basically what they're saying is, hey, public schools, you still need to these are still your babies, and you still need to make sure that they're getting the services that they need to get, including things like their annual IEP. And then you basically just making sure that they're in a place that is taking good care of your kids.
Okay. So non-public schools are part of the IEP process. That's what this is about.
When we have a kid who's placed in a non-public school, they and we are both part of the process.
Okay. What was it like before this recommendation?
In our district, it was not any different.
Okay.
But I will tell you anecdotally that, let me just put it this way. An awful lot of these places are in the middle of nowhere, Utah and Nevada. And there were plenty of kids being sent there when districts had not yet visited the facilities.
Okay. All right. Okay, that settles it for me. Thank you. So I give the motion to pass this? Is that what I'm saying? So
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion is passed.
Thank you for allowing us to discuss it.
Great. All right. So now you've had an experience of how we handle things that are pulled from the consent calendar. We're building up that knowledge base. It's great stuff. All right, and that brings us to agenda item 15, Board of Trustees and Superintendent's comments, committee reports, and agenda setting. And Of late, we have been doing a lot less reporting of activities and things. So I would certainly welcome any of that. And it looks like Carrie has a bit of that.
Yes. Well, first, it's an agenda thing. I am wondering, I've been meaning to bring this up. I think it would be helpful at the board meetings if we could show the agenda at the same time. It's hard for me to toggle back and forth. And it must be hard for the audience if they're watching us on Zoom. And I noticed that other elected bodies do have the agenda. You know, the screen is always up, right? The screen sharing. Is that something that's possible to do with our technical guys so that you wouldn't have to manage it, Alan?
Well, it'd be possible, Carrie, but the thing is, it would take up a lot of the real estate.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd
So would that be
big
a problem?
Well, it just means that there's that much less screen for other stuff. So, I don't know, I personally have it printed, and I also have it up on a separate browser. So I've got it in two places here.
Yeah, our printer is broken at home, so I guess I'll try doing that. If
But
it
it
takes
just-
up too much real estate, I understand then.
If we put it on the Zoom screen, it just means that there's that much less you can have on the Zoom.
Mhm.
Like if you have the panelists up and you have the speaker up, or you have a grid mode, like it would just be.
Okay. What about the audience though? Because they must not know what we're talking about at times. Still not worth it.
Have you heard
giving
someone
up the-
complain about it?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, I mean, we can think about it, but yeah, okay. As soon as my husband is supposed to get us a new printer, I will try that. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about, because I've mentioned this to a lot of people and I wanted to mention it to the governance team. When I was at the CSBA conference, I was very inspired. I am surprised how well it worked virtually. I was really engaged, like all day, every day. But the workshop that inspired me the most was a presentation from San Gabriel Unified, K through 12. And what they did when COVID hit, I can't believe they did this. They doubled down on the visual and performing arts. And what this means is they made sure that everybody, every kid in the entire district was part of the visual and performing arts. So it's not the kids that are already in it, it's every kid. So they drove around and passed out instruments and passed out art packets. And I was so inspired by that, right? So, and what they believe, and I'm in contact with all these people, if anybody wants to talk to them, they believe that their engagement is okay because of this, and everybody else is struggling with engagement with some students, and they believe it helped with kids' mental health. So anyway, I want to share that was very inspiring because that's not what anybody else did. Everyone else focused on academics only. And I'm also wondering with the, the attendance problems that we see, if it would help if kids were involved in something fun, something inspiring. It could be computer science, something along with academics. So anyway, I'll try to get more information if anybody is interested, but I wanted to share that. I was also very inspired by the final keynote speaker, Leslie Obram Jr., cast member from Hamilton, and his speech was one of the best keynotes I've ever heard. And again, he underlined the importance of, the performing arts. So I really think that my son has done better because he's had his academic load, but he's also had trumpet. And I think it's really helped him. So I wish every kid in our district had that. So I wanted to share that as we start this new board year.
I think that's great. Other reports before we go to the agenda setting portion of this?
Also, I had the chance to visit 2 of the school sites. I appreciate the invitations. I'm to those whose invitation I've not yet been able to accept. I do want to visit all the school sites in the coming months and get to have a tour of each place. And I appreciate the ones I've had already. So I think it's been a good way to get to know about our different sites.
As far as myself, I don't know where we talk about the CSBA conference. I don't know if that's in the retreat, I don't know where it belongs, but I wanted to share that I went to a communications workshop that was really good as I think about building bridges and strengthening our community and building trust, looking at communication, not just as our website and things of that sort, but how we communicate, what tools we use, that it was actually pretty inspiring and very, I'm sure we do a lot of things, but I think there were some examples out there that impressed me as a parent on how we can communicate and brush up our communication system and style and approach with family.
Yeah, I do think that, a lot of the CSBA presentations are still available for downloading of materials and presentation information. And I think it's probably very valuable to us to go back and look at not only the ones we attended and make sure that we have the materials, but some of the ones that were down on our list of would like to attend but couldn't because of the conflicts, and get as much of the materials as we can. I know one of the ones that I attended was the building of a new governance team. Clearly expected that there was a lot of that to be very relevant to our governance team right away. And it's definitely part of the reason that I think, CSBA facilitation at our retreat would be a very valuable thing for us to be looking at here. And that's a key thing that I want to talk about as we get into the agenda setting. Does anybody else want to jump on the report outs before we go into the agenda setting?
Before you move on, we have until Friday to download any material that we wanted if we went to the conference.
Okay, so I would recommend that to everybody, to take a scan through and look for all the ones that you think would have some value and pull that down. We can definitely look at how we go about sharing those and set up we can certainly define an agenda item, and it could be one that carries on for more than one meeting, where we give brief conversation or brief sharing of things that we think are valuable, and definitely be sharing it with the superintendent and get it out to the staff to get things going. So looking at the governance calendar, and this is particularly for Rich and Shanice, our governance calendar lays out around the year kind of the check-in points of mandated things for us to be looking at throughout the year, and check-in points on goals and priorities we have set for the district. And this is a core guidance for anything that goes on in our agenda setting throughout the year. So in no way does kind of the president walk in there and say, oh, here's how I want to put together my agenda for the next meeting or two. But this is the guidance of what's got to be there as a starting point. The secondary input to that is things that are raised during this agenda item on each agenda, where board members have the opportunity to recommend things to be included in the list. And then that is where the board representatives and superintendent will work in the agenda setting meetings to lay out what we've got. Historically, what we have set up is that for any item suggested by a board member, if any second board member supports having that on the agenda, then it is sufficient for consideration. The superintendent will give us the idea of whether or not it would involve significant staff time to prepare for that. And if it is something that is outside of our goals and standard agenda items, then at that point, we would require the concurrence of at least a majority of the board, at least 3 board members, to request that that staff time be invested in preparing for it. Then that becomes part of the list that the president and either vice president or another board member are working on with the superintendent going forward. So again, this should be, in my estimation, a significant part of the things that we talk about in greater depth at our retreat, to make sure that these types of protocols and approaches and norms are what we as a governance team want to rely on, or how we refine them going forward. I also think the retreat is going to be an opportunity to have some guidance and leadership of best practices hopefully from CSBA on building the governance team, on establishing our own new norms, on ensuring fairness and equity of voices, on looking at our elected officer positions, on looking at our style of managing meetings, on looking at our work as a governance team. And so for that particular item, we have talked about a time early, hopefully early in January, but certainly in January if we can get to it. And I know Interim Superintendent Leach has done some groundwork of kind of looking into possibilities. Would you like to talk about that a little bit, and then we can have additional board member input and see where we can get with that?
It does seem that there's an extensive amount of content that we would like to cover since we're new and we're kind of establishing our relationships with each other. It most likely sounds like it's a little bit longer than even if we did like a half day during the week. So I'm not sure if people are interested in doing a full day on a Saturday. That would give us enough time, right? If we finish early, great. And so I meant that in a positive manner, FYI. But so we can, if we have some dates and we want to have a CSBA facilitator, I can go ahead and look to see who's available. I can see who's available and then come back and provide like a doodle poll to you all to see what dates are available for us to try to coordinate available facilitation. I would imagine
no facilitator.
I'm sorry.
Could we consider starting like a half day no facilitator? Does everybody want a facilitator?
I think I prefer one.
You prefer one? Okay.
Especially, yeah, if we're going to do a little bit of work around styles and other things. Shawnice and I saw Luann. What's her last name?
I'll look it up.
She's
Rivera,
a past.
I think.
Yes, Luann Rivera. And I've heard her speak before. She was one of my favorite past presidents from CSBA. She was really good in the workshop that we attended. But I'm also for a full day or 3/4 of a day. I think in the past, the problem is we've had facilitators, but the board doesn't spend any time talking. So I don't want a facilitator that's just talking to us all day. I'd like to really spend time getting to know each other.
That was my concern with the facilitator.
Huh?
That was my concern with the facilitators,
Yeah.
that they were taking too much of the time. But if there's someone who actually leads a good discussion,
Right.
then that could be good.
Right. Somebody who will get us talking. Yeah.
So what we could do is if we can secure a day and a facilitator, then I can work with the facilitator as far as surveying the board on topics. And so one of those topics would be the availability to talk amongst yourself and develop relationships, so that we make sure that the facilitator allows, an appropriate amount of time for us to do that. So that we are driving, right, the conversation that we want to have during our retreat. And then the facilitator helps make that happen for us instead of them telling us what we should talk about.
I have a question. Maybe I'm naive because I've been in meetings where people have facilitated. I've been a meeting facilitator. Isn't it typical for a facilitator to promote team building and connection between the people who are part of the meeting?
Yes, but we have not spent a lot of time on that, right?
But I'm just saying, like, even as a skill set, even if we haven't wanted to talk to each other, the facilitator should be skilled enough to do.
You would think so.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
That's not what we've done.
Okay.
So I would say that to the extent that that has been a challenge for our board, I think it is more likely to be overcome better with the right facilitator than us being clever enough to overcome it without a facilitator entirely.
I'm going to trust the process, but I just think we need to make sure whoever, I mean, we love the person who was talking before because she was engaging with us. If we make sure that that person knows that they need to be doing governance building and team building and communication as part of the process. And if they're skilled, they know how to do that.
I would also put forth the proposition that I believe this evening has been far more conversational between our board than any meeting in a long time, which was substantially my intent as the facilitator of this meeting. So I hope that we are establishing a direction that this retreat will really reinforce and build.
Well, it sounds like maybe the week, if we're looking at early January, I mean, realistically, it's either the first, I mean, I think it's the week, the 11th, right? If we're going to, I mean, unless we're going to do the very first week, the 4th through 8th.
Yeah.
I
So
assume it's one of those 2 weeks that if we're going to try to do something.
yeah. So to me,
I'm fine with the weekday or the weekend, except I'll say there's the San Mateo County CSBA is the 9th. So we
Right.
probably don't want to conflict with that. So if we're going to do a Saturday, that makes it the 16th, but I'm open to I can carve out a weekday with this much notice, but I'm fine with the weekend as well. I'll let other people comment on their schedules.
I can do the weekend. I can always do a Monday because that's my day off. So if I know in advance, I can make sure I'm not scheduling anything. But a Saturday or a Monday.
Well, I have meetings booked Monday through Friday of that week, the 11th through 15th, but I can probably work around them. Frankly, I also would not sure whether a full day on Zoom would be a productive use of time. I don't know how many of you have done that. I mean, and that's different than attending the CSBA meetings, actually, which weren't full day either, but
I think that's a good point.
Went to a board orientation, it was like 6 hours. And so part of the skill piece of it, of doing things on Zoom, is that just like our kids, I want to put that out there, our kids are on Zoom all day. So what they do is they create breaks and interaction and games. And so if our kids can do it, then I think our board should do it.
Yes, it's true. That was the reaction I had because I feel like I was at CSBA all day and it's like, oh my gosh, this is what our kids are doing.
That's perhaps a good example.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
I
guess
support all day or a half day. I'll go either way.
if Luann, so I need to reach out. So there's a couple different things. So do we have any other suggestions for facilitators as well? I know that with the board choosing leadership and associates, that we have also done retreats with Eric, who can lead that. And again, he's worked with cabinet as well. So he's worked with the superintendent. And could again survey the board and so that we can focus on topics and so forth.
I think that would also be a good alternative choice.
Okay. And both, I mean, Eric's more familiar. I mean, he has very familiar with CSBA, but also with AXA and so forth. I mean, everyone's kind of connected. So, and then what I'll do is I'll ask for their availability through January. Hopefully we can get some good dates from that, but I will also ask them for immediately available in February as well, just in case it doesn't fit. We'll create a doodle poll. We'll send it to everybody. Once we secure a facilitator and a date, then we will survey the board for topics. Yeah, thumbs up.
Great.
I have a question. Is part of the retreat around what are we looking for in a superintendent, or is that something different that we do with the firm, or where does that lie?
That should be more with the firm.
That's more with the firm. Okay, thank
But
you.
that's where, Eric might very well turn out to be a great facilitator for the retreat to make that be an extended, rather seamless growth opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
I would add on Saturdays, that following Saturday, the 16th, is also the San Mateo County School Board Association Executive Board Retreat, which would be something that I would need to blow off if we chose that Saturday. So if that's the only thing that would be a roadblock to Saturday the 16th is a good choice, I'll go with the retreat. But if we could avoid that, that would be better. That's my only conflict. I could make Mondays work.
Do we want to entertain it all, depending on schedules, 2 half days, one week, one the other week, with some homework in between?
I don't know. Part of me is just like to
You
have
just
one
want,
full. Yeah.
I support either.
Well, I'll give them the menu. We'll see what we get back, and then we can figure it out from there. Okay.
Excellent. Okay, are there other agenda items that anybody would want to raise at this point? I imagine we'll come up with a whole slew of great agenda items out of the retreat. All right.
Question, when you say agenda items for I'm just making sure I understand for the master calendar that we're talking about, or for the next meeting, or?
At this point, it's items that would be in a near upcoming meeting.
Okay. Is it possible we could talk about mental health with our kids? And I don't know if we've done it in the past. It may be untimely, just with us, the surge going back up, some of the emails we've gotten about families who are dealing with issues more privately. They're not part of an IEP or 504 plan, so they're not known to us. Just to kind of talk about that, even if we reopen school, these are kids that we're going to have, or students who we're going to have to talk about eventually anyhow. But just I don't know if mental health needs to be on there. It's just something I'm thinking about.
One thought, Shawnee's and Alan, is maybe agenda item on the SEL task force, which would be kind of an introduction to the board, right? Or maybe an overview of what the wellness committee has done and is working on. Would that be a better way to start? Because that I think that would be useful for all board members, and it would be educational for the newer members.
Some of the challenge, just real quick on the things that you just named, is staff availability right now. With our reopening plan being submitted to the county and the new Cal OSHA requirements to open, the amount of testing and contact tracing that we have to do as we scale up, we are maxed out right now. So I would not be able to commit to a time where we could offer that. We can definitely put it on the docket, and we can talk about the availability of time as we move forward. But these new Cal OSHA requirements, they're a doozy. They're a doozy for any district of substantial size that is trying to reopen. And so we're currently trying to scale that up.
Okay, thank you.
So I would point out, it looks like on our March 24th meeting, the governance calendar has an update on mental health services. So if we could shape that to be sure that it covers everything that you want, it's not real soon, but it's about a quarter out from
whenever it's available to put on there. I just, especially with all the work they're doing around reopen, I don't want to interrupt what they're doing, but I want to hear more about that.
So I think some time with the governance calendar to really kind of get the feel for everything that's already in the core mix might be really helpful in shaping a sense of what additional we want to ask for.
I think maybe just a general comment. My assumption is that all of these board committees at some point show up on the agenda for the whole board to hear about. Like, I mean, just for Shanice, that all these things, all these different groups that we've all signed up to have one or two people on, at some point, each of them in the year is on an agenda. So the whole board hears about them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm sure I probably would have caught on to that, but I was thinking particularly about mental health as it relates to possible reopening, but also some of the emails that we've been receiving around people who are dealing with those things more privately. And so it is a direct correlation with being within the pandemic. It's a direct correlation to academic growth and support, or whether it's learning supports or whatever we're trying to do, that we need to consider this strongly. I would hate for us to have kids come to learning groups or whatever the case may be, and we don't know about their mental health and we're not prepared for that. So.
Okay, so we'll definitely keep that in our view as we go forward, but not put something on the on top of the staff right now. All right, we had that is the last of our agenda items. So we had expressed a desire to return to closed session if we ended early enough. I think I've beaten President Weiner's regular record of completion time, so it's a little earlier. And I would want to poll the governance team about returning to closed session to continue our discussion based on our current level of excitement and exhaustion.
As long as we take a 5-minute break, I'm fine. As long as everybody else is fine.
Alan, can I ask about an alternative, which might be adding, assuming we get scheduled with the search firm next week, might we add an hour to that?
I think that would work for me, and I would appreciate the idea of actually, particularly not keeping interim superintendent Leach here any longer than we already have.
So just a caution about next week is a lot of people are off, like me and Laura. Obviously, I'm at the service of the board, so I will attend whatever meeting is required. But when there's no students is usually when we try to make the downtime. But we can, I think that the search firm would be 1 to 2 hours. So just to kind of state that.
That might be better to do it tonight. I don't think we're going to take that long.
I think it'd be good to go back to close for at least a little bit tonight. We don't have to, I don't think we're gonna finish anything, and maybe we target only being like 30 minutes or less.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It was just way too rushed. So need a few more minutes.
Okay. Well, then let's.
Can we say 9:40?
Yeah. Why don't we say 9:40? And with that, we'll do the Zoom wave from open session, and we'll see the governance team in closed session in 9:40. Thank you.
Can somebody, do I go back to the closed link?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you.